Thank you. All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. All right, thanks very much. Huh? Oh, I don't know. Okay, good. Welcome to Professional Speakers Academy. For those of you, it's your first meeting. Welcome to our family. For those who've been here previously, welcome back. We have a fantastic meeting organised for you. And we're going to begin, as always, by throwing it over to you. So I would like to hear from you first about what have you been up to doing since the last meeting? What have been some of your successes that you have had? Or any questions that you have that you'd like answered in this meeting based on what's required for you next? So, hands up. Who would like to begin with telling me a bit about what you've been up to since, please? So, I'll start from the back and work forward. That's Jason, I think. So, come on up here, please. Would you come on up here? Take to the stage. Now, we are being live streamed around the world as well. This is going through the Professional Speakers Academy Facebook group. It's live as we speak right now, albeit maybe 5 seconds behind. So keep that in mind when you're speaking. You could eye contact the audience, but every now and again straight down the camera as well. Absolutely. For those people watching internationally as well. Okay, so this is Jason. So Jason, tell us what you've been up to.
So I've been a member for now about 3.5 years, and when I first joined I found that I had to learn a lot of stuff and unlearn a lot of stuff, and as a result my speaking got worse, and my results got worse, and I carried on pushing.
Great advert, thank you so much. Anybody else?
And I carried on pushing through, and took some phenomenal advice from Andy. And recently, we've been doing 2 to 3 presentations a month, and probably adding about 15 to 20k to my business on a monthly basis from speaking. I've utilised what I've learnt from actually some of the coaching to help coach my associates in my team. So they're now speaking as well and getting similar, some good results with what they're doing. And also some personal news. Got a baby due in 7 weeks.
Way! Well done. Jason, give a hand. Very nice. Let's see. I was working from the back. So who's next in the back? I guess it's Davey. Then across, and I'm going to jump over this side next. So. This is Dave McConaughey. Would you give him a hand, please, Dave McConaughey?
James, can you come and translate, please? So I'll do my best to slow it down and pause in between my sentences, and then you'll be able to fully understand what I'm saying. Now, that took a lot of patience, so I'll try my best. Okay, so Dave McConaughey from DMC Fitness. Jason, you fucking stallion, where are you? Yes. No, on a serious note, what have we been up to? Okay, so, I'm David McConaughey. I own a company called DMC Fitness, built a company in Glasgow. I do one-to-one executive health and fitness coaching, and I do workshops for the Health Education Board Scotland, teaching young dentists how to be emotionally aware and suicide prevention. What have we been doing? I've rebranded the business based on my UBS. 2 years ago, Andy made a comment in here, and he said, for the more experienced business owners, take what you already know in your head and sell it to people. And sell it at a value that you're actually truly worth. So when I met Andy, I was a bog standard £40 a session PT. I was doing 10 sessions for £400. Now I command £10,000 for 1 year's coaching, and I look after a selection of the most successful business owners in Glasgow, like Professor Lauren Carrera that I shared. He launched and founded and grew Harper McLeod, the largest law firm in Scotland, that has a 84 million turnover, and he's one of my favourite clients at the moment. Hired me at 63, couldn't walk properly, and he's been active ever since. So, that change, Andy said to me, I took it on board, it was just a comment, and I went forward and I launched a Diamond Elite Executive Coaching Programme based on my UBS, and to date I've turned over £110,000 on that. Thank you. I've added 4 more clients in the last 6 months, and I've retained all but 1 of my clients. So that's been the biggest change. I've had usual and personal, we all have stuff going on, managed to navigate through that. I suppose the thing I want to emphasise is that this is an incubator for awesomeness. For the new members who are a wee bit fearful, maybe a wee bit shy, we were all there as well. What I will say is, having been here for 4 years, having been fat, having been lean, and been in between, because I have been 4 stone heavier than I am just now in this community, not one person fucking judged me, even though I was judging myself. Not one person gave me shit. Andy broke rapport with me and pushed me in the right direction because he had to do it, because I needed some tough love, and it's worked. But I don't think you'll ever... I honestly, I defy you to go somewhere else and find a group of compassionate, loving, caring, understanding, maverick misfits, like we all are. Thank you. I fit in. I've never fitted in before, as much as I'm a maverick misfit myself. I fit in here. I love coming here. I love the hugs. I love the energy. I love the compassion. This is what you're involved in. The more you stay here, the more you'll truly find out who you're supposed to be and who you are, and the higher you can serve. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Dave McConaughey! Thank you, son. Thank you, mate. I love that. Beautiful. And I like that because actually I was thinking a name for my podcast that I'm about to launch, because I'll be interviewing many of you guys on the podcast, and I decided the name of the podcast would be Messages from Mavericks. That's what I decided the name will be. So that's like for me, that's like a validation of that. So wonderful. Right next to you, I think. Come on up, please. Yes. Amazing. There we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So, to be honest, for me, this is the first
tell everybody
time.
your name so everybody knows your name first.
My name is Koen Schobbers. I'm from the Netherlands.
Now, I'm going to go a bit of coaching here. I was going to let Davey off a bit, but now you've stepped even further back. There we go.
There we go.
David was doing a little bit of this, right? But,
I learned my first thing already. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Nice to meet you as well. So I'm from the Netherlands, and I'm in the gaming and esports scene for the past 13 years. I started when I was 14. I'm now 26. And I've been working a lot with parents and their gaming child, as well as with companies trying to enter the esports scene. And what I find difficult...
people don't know what esports is, in a nutshell.
Esports is competitive gaming, which is gaming. Yeah, so it's gaming on a high level where you basically challenge opponents for big prize money pools and hardware, for example.
Because people can play each other online now.
Yeah, and you travel the world. I've played in front of audiences, 3,000 people. I've been a professional myself.
Sometimes people come to a stadium to actually watch this.
Yeah,
it's crazy. They come, 2 people playing in the middle, 3,000 people on the edge watching on giant screens.
At the moment, like the biggest stadium we filled is the Bird's Nest in Korea. 40,000 people watching esports gaming in a stadium.
Huge.
Live.
Massive.
Besides millions and millions and millions of people online. So it's just a part in the stadium. And it's actually quite a big problem for parents to have this gaming child and sitting home and staying inside. And I came to PSU last year, February, where I actually wanted to structure my knowledge. Because I'm 13 years in the scene, I have a very big network, I know a lot, but I didn't know how to structure it properly, which finally, in the end, is your UBS as well, right? It's basically structuring.
It's about trying to find what the solution is.
Exactly.
What's the need?
And one of the models that I designed was my 5S models, which is for living a balanced lifestyle at home with your gaming child. And it's sleep, study, sports, social life, and then spell is game. And I'm very happy to say that at the end of last year, the company Vodafone picked up the model, and I've worked together with Vodafone to bring that model to everyone in the Netherlands. And currently we have more than 1 million views on all the videos that we've produced. And thank you. And besides having those videos for parents and to help them out, we've also made a study module for children on primary schools and secondary schools to help them out as well, bringing knowledge to the younger generation and make sure that they live a proper, healthy lifestyle, including playing games. Not that they have to stop it, but they have to balance it. So And now my first time at PSA, I hope to learn even more. It's great being here. I'm searching a coach, so if you want to hang out with me this couple of days, you know, I'm here, so thank you.
Well done. Give him a big hand. Thank you so much. Thank you. Somebody on this side? Yes. We'll have Dominic, I think, first, and I'll move over to people next, which... Thank you. There we are. Dominic, give him a hand.
Hi everybody, it's great to see you all. My name is Dominic Sakakini and I sell diamonds for pleasure and profit. I first came to Andy's event in November, the free event up in London, after 2 years of nagging from my wife. And Kevin Wright, thank you very much for getting me here. Okay. And basically what happened was I went to Andy's first event and signed up. We went to the PSU. And with the help of my gorgeous wife over there, we went to PSA. My first PSA event was at the end of November, and I did the first talk. Now, I'd done public speaking before, and I thought I was good at it. I found out I was shit. So, with the help of Cheryl, and with Andy, and a few other people that are here, who, if I haven't mentioned your name, thank you very much. So I did my first diamond event as a Academy member, and guess what? I had 7 people turn up.
Excellent, well done.
But that was using Andy's system. I usually had 30 people turn up. However, on previous events I'd done, my sales were only about £5,000 at the end of the event. This first event I did, using Andy's system, and let me just tell you, it was more like the bus stop system, not the jet set system. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. However, my first event, I did £35,000. I still haven't got a clue what I'm doing. I'm looking forward to Andy ripping my presentations apart so I can start afresh. So it's all about rebirth. So guys, this is my second PSA attendance, and I wish you all the very best, and I look forward to working with everyone here in the room. Thank you.
Dominic Sakakini. Peter. Here we are from the Dutch contingent once more.
Thank you. Hi, good morning. Hi there. This is my 8th PSA, and it's all about the journey. Okay. Koen, great. Where's you, Koen? Koen, great. It's all about the journey, and I know I was for the first time on stage in Amsterdam at Andy's place, and Koen came to me just in the break, and then I got a little bit, he disappeared a little bit, and then I saw this Vodafone commercial of you, which is very great, very passionate about children playing games. And now you're here after 1 year. And and this morning we started at breakfast brainstorming about getting value with parents, etc. So this is already part of the journey and this PSA. It started with on Schiphol, getting in with the friends, flying in, having new people around the breakfast table. So I think that's one of the good parts of this community and this family. So how is it with me? I'm changed my Marion's UBS. My great ace coach. I got one of my own, but that's personalized. It's more a map. I developed a master entrepreneur training, which is a training for 4 days, where I help creative entrepreneurs to become more entrepreneurial. So now I've got my own, but with the old one, made by Mrs. Cheryl Chapman, I think, it was good enough to make me to the first 200,000 K. Just so don't make it too perfect. Just get out there and serve the people, because that's what it is all about, and then make it your own. I've got a free event. I've done about 12, 13 now. I've got my Master Entrepreneur program. I did it a kind of 7, 8 times now. I'm a little bit pissed about people giving me an 8.5 or a 9 for my 4 days event. And then suddenly they don't implement enough. So this is really good thing. We have to talk about this second back end, this academy stuff, because people are disappointed, and I want to upsell them after half a year. And then they're a little bit ashamed because they didn't implement enough, they don't feel good enough. And they give me all the reasons of which I think, yeah, you should stay and you should keep coming, but they use it as a reason not to come. So this is really good PSA for me. Last Saturday, I had my free event. It was complete other level. I was really connected with myself, really aware. I didn't need lovers. I didn't have to be valued by other people. I sold 22 master entrepreneurs, times 1,500, which is 33,000 just in one day. It was my best event ever. Thank you. But the best thing was, I think it's getting to another level now. So I'm really congruent with my message. I can put the knife, as I said in the post, I can put the knife really harder, deeper, twist it more around, but from a place of love. And because I really know, I really believe in that people need what I give. So thank you.
Peter, well done.
Thank you very much. One or two more. Let's see.
Okay, I'm going to go for Michelle at the back. We should give some ace teams some opportunity, should we not? So, most people would know Michelle, so here we are. Thank you, Michelle.
Great. So if you saw the wince a while ago, you know the reason why. I'm on my weight loss journey, so that's one of the things that has happened since the last PSA. Because...
What does that mean?
Right. And what that means to me is that I've broken past a barrier, because I've constantly... This is a 4 years journey that I've been a roller coaster. But it's the first time that I've actually done it, and I feel and see the difference. So you can imagine when
What's
I walk...
the it, please?
The it. So the it for me is that I've always been unhappy with how I look. So despite the fact that everybody always see this confident person, for me, I was struggling. And then now I have a reason why I need to do it. So as some of you saw from the post, Sir Andy...
I like that.
Sir Andy.
That has a certain ring to it, do you believe? Is the Queen listening? She should be.
Well, the main thing was, to be honest, it was about being congruent with your message, which is very, very important, because one of the things that I speak about is creating your desired life. And it's very amazing, because it's like this year, everything's just coming into that place of just flowing. So for me, I remember I was at Elite and Andy was giving a delegate feedback, and they said something about health, and Andy's response was, "You're not being congruent with your message. You're talking about health, but you're not taking care of yourself." And I sat there and I thought, that is me. I hardly sleep. I don't eat properly. I don't pay attention to myself at all. And sometimes you get lost on that journey because you're so busy building the business, but you don't spend time focusing on yourself. And that just stayed with me. He just stayed in my head. Like 2 days after, it was just still there. And I messaged him and I said, "You know what? You made this statement and you've just stuck with me." And he said, "Okay, great. So what's your goal?" So he started giving me some tips. And then I spoke at Grace the Stage. Many thanks for Cheryl having me. And that went phenomenal. And they thought, "You know what? You need to speak at Power to Achieve." And so I went to my bed that Saturday because Andy messaged and said, "How would you feel about speaking at Power to Achieve?" And I thought, great, yeah, excited. And I went to my bed and I was like, I'm surprised that he's not attached anything to that. And then I wake up on the Sunday morning, no lie, put my clothes on, was going to church, and I looked at my phone, and what does he send? Another message. "Okay, great. So what is your goal that you've set? You smash it and then you'll have the opportunity." And I thought, darn, I knew it was coming. But you know what? It's good, because I just want to share something with you guys. When I came to PSA, my husband thought I was mad because I literally went home and I was selling stuff in my house to join this academy. Yeah? Because I left here and I thought, I need to do this. I didn't have a business, because I hear so many people saying, "I'm doing this, but I don't see how it's helping me." You need to reach out to the community, because there are people here to help. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I remember the first person I spoke to was Jessin. I was like, "I've started this, but I don't have any idea what I'm going to be doing with it." And it's gone from that to having now 3 folds in my business that has taken off so much. When I started, I had just saved ourselves from getting evicted. Hadn't yet bought our house, just about to get evicted. Now we've bought that house, and next month we will be buying the completion on another house that we'll be moving to. Yeah? So that's the first thing. The third thing, we're building a holiday home in Jamaica. Now, I'm saying, yeah? So, and I'm just sharing with this not to boast, because the husband that said I was mad is now the husband that allows me. He just went, oh, when are you going again? How many days? Yeah? So it's changed. But it's you to believe and to reach out to the help that is in the group, because I would not be doing this and I would not be able to do it without having the help and support of all of the ACE mentors and having you guys. You know how good I felt today? They were like, oh my God, you look so nice. And yesterday I felt like strangling my personal trainer. But today now I feel happy about having my personal trainer, because I've come and you guys have said, you know, you look so good. And you know what? Lots of love to you all. You've messaged me. You've sent me tips. That is what the family community is about. So many thanks to you, Andy, for creating it.
You're welcome. Thank you, Michelle. Very nice. And on the subject of fitness, Davey, we're doing something tomorrow. Is that right? So can I just pass the microphone to you so you can just, because not everybody knows this, obviously, because they wouldn't have all heard the thing that you're going to offer people.
So I spoke to Dee and she agreed, and then Andy, and we're going to do a workout in here. It's for all levels. It's if you're into yoga and that type of stuff, there'll be that implemented in as well. It's mobility, bit of dynamic stretching, some body weight training for all levels, stuff you'll be able to take away with you and implement at home and need access to the room. But apart from that, it's a 6:30 sharp start for a 7:45 approximate finish to give everybody enough time to have breakfast and then come in energised for the storytelling day and the competition. So this is for tomorrow morning, is that right? Tomorrow morning. As a show of hands, I know there's like 12 people already. Fuck. Hey! Gonna have to print off. Oh, okay, so if you're up for coming in, just be here in the morning. I'm going to join in as well, but I'll lead it. I have music.
Now, Davey, some people might not have bought sports equipment.
No, there's no equipment. You are the gym.
No, just like clothing.
Yeah.
They may not have brought that with them. Does it matter? Could they?
No, as long as you've got something loose, you can train in your bare feet. Do it in your pants. Yeah, all the ladies have to wear their underwear. I wear mine as well, I don't mind. I've got a pink thong.
Good. Okay.
No, on a serious note, tomorrow morning, here for 6:30.
There we are. Thanks,
Thank
Davey. Thank you very much. And Daniel. This is Daniel, everybody. Would you give a nice round of applause, please, Daniel? Thank you, mate.
Hello, everybody. Okay, so since last time,
Yes.
I've spoken at a couple of multi-speaker events.
Nice.
And for me to do that, you know, a few years back would just be super scary. It just wouldn't happen for me. Mm. Not only that, I have now actually completed my online course, and with help of Matt Wilson and his team, we're going to start promoting it. And again, I've found myself as well being a lot more motivated to do stuff. You know, previously I used to procrastinate. But I think the biggest win that I've had over the past 3 months is what happened about 2 weeks ago, and I did put a post up on this yesterday. And I had always had this fear about storytelling. Yeah. And I always believed that I couldn't tell stories. And about 2 weeks ago, I had entered a Toastmaster competition. And I'd woken up that very day, and I didn't know what I was going to speak about. And I thought, I'm going to speak about what I normally speak about letting go. Or I'm going to speak about my journey with cold showers. But I didn't do that. Instead, what I decided to do was to make up a completely random story about how I became a rock star. And, yeah, exactly, yeah. And it was really interesting because I thought to myself, okay, let me make it as ridiculous as possible. In this story, you know, I'm going to be part of a four-man band. There was Slasher, Flasher, Clasher, and yeah, I know. And I was Unicorn. Okay. And I told the story about how I would throw a TV out of a hotel room. So come the evening of a competition, I'm there telling the story, and I found out people were laughing at me, which I couldn't believe in the past, because, you know, my best friend used to say, "You're not funny. Don't just, you know, don't tell stories." But the most amazing thing is I end up winning second prize in the competition and getting to the regional finals. But the funny thing was, is that afterwards, everyone came up to me and started saying, "Oh my God, that was such an inspirational story. I couldn't believe you were a rock star. I couldn't believe it." And they actually believed that I was a former rock star. So there you go.
Wonderful. I'll give you the rock star, Daniel. People still believe I'm actually quite good at what I do as well, quite frankly, but there we are. All right, so thank you so much for your participation in that. So here's what we here's what we are doing now for today and then for the rest of the meeting. Now this is loose, obviously, because I never know exactly how things will go. But here's the current plan. So this morning, or actually today, the main thrust of today will be for me helping you guys to design, develop, and then deliver a different type of story, which we're going to call your client story and/or case study story. Because some of you, your personal story isn't the appropriate story, actually, or it may not be the right story. So whether you've got a personal story fixed or not, or don't, you all need a client story as well. It might just be that rather than deliver the case study story as a replacement to your personal story, as opposed, which is your expert positioning story, you might use this case study story instead. Or, if you like your personal story and it works, you might use this story at another time later on in the presentation, as well as your current personal story. So, for all of you, this is going to be useful. So I'll give you the distinctions on that later on today as we go through it, whenever that is. And I'll also do a demo of it as well, so you can see it. And then I'll break the demo down as well, so that hopefully that makes it easy. Then you'll have time, obviously, in this training to create it with the help of the mentors and coaches, and therefore deliver it as well. Hopefully today there'll be enough time to do that as well. Tomorrow is your day to practice, to get your stage time, to get the performance enhanced. Obviously, this is the day where you want to open yourself up to as much mentoring and coaching and feedback as you can from the coaches. We'll also combine that with the quarterly competition. So you'll be speaking in pods, but then ultimately those pods get voted into who is the best in that pod, etc. Those other pods then compete with each other, or people compete with each other, semi-finals and finals, which will then take place on main stage. Someone will win third, second, first. So that's happening tomorrow. And then Sunday, my plan is to make a more slightly business-orientated day. I'm going to teach you, as mentioned by Peter, how do you do the next upsell. So if you then, if you started to get people into your, the first paid event, what do you then do to monetize those people that have paid that are sitting in that room? Because years ago, I first started out selling people or inviting people to a free event called Breakthrough. I then sold them into an event called Fire Your Desire, and then that was it. I didn't have anything else to sell them, which meant, I wasn't making enough money, because normally the first upsell, you'll make some money because you've got all this cost of marketing and stuff, and you've got to pay yourself and staff maybe and all that kind of stuff. So the second upsell, which is normally more expensive, is much more profitable as well, because you've already paid the cost of acquisition some time ago, and it's also where your best clients will become the best case studies, because they typically go deeper and they get a better all-round result, which you can hold up as the goal for everyone joining your programs, or indeed engaging in your service. So more about that, obviously, later on Sunday. And also, if there's time, and I think there will be, I'll also be showing you a strategy to help you fill your preview events without the need for previews. So what that means is, back up, that's wrong. So rather than have to just do preview events, physical, how can you sell a high ticket of, say, £1,000 to £2,000 without needing a preview event at all? Using a webinar strategy that we're currently using, that's starting to gain traction, and I think you'll find that useful. I can't give you all the distinctions yet because we're quite new to it, but I like teaching as I'm doing stuff, so you guys stay current and with it rather than behind. So with that said, that's what we're going to do. The other thing I said I'd do, which I'll start with now, is talk to you just briefly this morning, before this first break for coffee and tea, whenever that is after this, is just talk to you about some thoughts I'm having about that might be useful for you as well, which is me thinking about a licensing model for what I do. which I'll start talking about briefly now. I'm not going to sell this to you today because it's not fully formed yet in my head. This is really your chance to give me feedback along the way as well, if this is something you think that would work. I don't want to sell it to you yet today because it's not fully formed, and the last thing I want you is paying for something that in the end, when it gets delivered, isn't quite right. So I'm not quite ready to sell it to you yet, but one thing you can do today if you're interested, say, look, I am this kind of, based on the metrics you've proposed today, this would be something of interest to me. And then you can just go on a name on a sheet or something, or just tell, yeah, well, probably do a name on a sheet or something. And then my team can follow you up if we decide to do this particular strategy, which in essence is about you either putting on your own event to sell my Speakers University courses, or just add it to a course you're already delivering. If you're already doing a preview event already, then maybe you add an extra half an hour and a half to sell people into Speakers University on stuff you're doing already. Does that make sense? So let me tell you about what I'm thinking in terms of how that will work and the kind of money I'm thinking about charging for it, and then how much you'd potentially make back for it. And if there is something of interest, again, you can just jot down your name on a sheet, and then my team, if I decide to do it, and I really genuinely haven't decided to do this model yet, because I want to make sure if and when I do it, that it's going to be a success. Okay? Because the last thing I want to do is you pay me for something that makes me money, but then when it turns around to you making money out of what you spent, I can't deliver. And in that case, I've just ruined my own community, if that makes sense, which isn't good for me. So let me tell you what I've got in mind for it and put the metrics. So the idea is, obviously, we've got a well-proven system, clearly. Evidence that you are here clearly suggests that it works. And how we make it work, obviously, is primarily we put preview events on, one-day events typically, although obviously I sometimes guest speak at other people's events as well. And during that sort of talk that we give, or I give, we sell people into coming to our Speakers University program, which on the day price is around about £2,000 plus the VAT. So what I'm thinking is, since you guys are all advocates of what I do anyway, and you're already great speakers, and you're already learning how to sell as well, it kind of makes sense to try to find within the PSA group itself, people that want and have the ability to help my brand to grow, and at the same time growing your income and leveraging the talents and skills that you're developing already. Now, so this is used for people that, some people here haven't even really kind of solidified the thing you're going to offer. You're not quite sure what it is yet, or you're not quite sure if it's the right thing yet. So maybe this could be the thing for you if you've not yet decided and really think, this is my mission, I'm going to do this thing. Again, or it's useful for those who've already proven that you can do it, and it feels kind of aligned with what you do already, but not competitive to what you do already. Then, of course, this could be a nice added additional side business, side hustle, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so in essence, you would be taught by me how to deliver my preview event. We'll start off, in essence, by making that preview event about 2 hours in length. So it'd be about 2 hours to 2.5 hours preview event. I'll teach you that preview event. So you learn what is the structure of that event, why and how does that pitch, if you like, for 2.5 hours, why does that work? What has to be there? What are the core beliefs I'm trying to change? How do you inspire and motivate people? How do I get you to build your story into it such your story works in that context? All of that stuff. How to do the pitch that I do at the end, which, we actually teach on Elite anyway, but how do you learn to do that specific pitch, one we get people on stage and all that? Now, clearly, I've got one example of why this will work for sure, because we're already kind of doing it with Cheryl, because we just started a new brand called Grace the Stage. Some of you might even be here that came through that program if you're brand new to this. And that's a women-only initial preview event, because I thought, why not? Why not? I can't necessarily, I'm maybe not attractive to a certain type of demographic straight away because they don't know me. They might think, oh, this is not really for me. So I don't want those people to miss out on my teachings just because I'm in the way. So I thought, would that work? Could that work? So we thought, put a new brand together. And so you know, that's what I'm thinking for the same for you. So if and when you decide to do this, you won't be branded, the page they land on won't be branded as Andy Harrington and you're my trainer, because that doesn't actually work. We've actually tried that. It didn't work very well. So instead now, when they land on, for example, the Grace the Stage page, it's you. You're the expert. Does that make sense? Right? It's all about you. I'm only mentioned when they arrive at the event, because you're then selling them into my program. Does that make sense? But the initial pull is you as the expert. So you are positioned. So again, what this will give you as part of the package is obviously that landing page is built, copy written by me and with you together. I'll need to speak to you a bit to find out a little bit about you, to build the landing page in such a way that it does convert. And it's worked really well, actually, because we're getting registrations, bookings, actually people wanting to come to the event for about £8 to £10, which is really good. It's actually cheaper than my own stuff. Like, for me, it's about 20 quid for a registration for an event, but Cheryl's events are actually even cheaper. And that's probably because it's more targeted in this case. Specifically, the message is nice and tight, not generic, as mine tends to be a little bit more. So that's really cool. And again, actually, Cheryl, you can perhaps speak on this briefly, just grab the microphone, because you've done 2 of those now, is that right? Is there 2? Yeah. It's 2 of those you've done, isn't it? You might as well come up here again, I know you can, just for the benefit of the camera. Get Cheryl Chapman, guys.
Yeah, so we've done 2 so far. The first one, if I'm honest, those that teach can't do, is my own feedback to myself. Got a bit in my head, put myself under immense fucking pressure. You know, loads of people in the audience are like, I came to support you. And I'm like, oh, fuck. 2 reasons. One, they're all there with the feedback sheets.
As in PSA members?
PSA members, yeah. So
yeah,
PSA
okay.
members come, just come to support you. And I'm like, they're all sitting there with the feedback sheets. I'm going to get loads of feedback at the end. Speaker stands, you know, all the rest of it. And the second one was, I was like, you're messing with my conversion rate. So I love you, but like... but the first event was oversubscribed. I mean, we literally had to turn away around about 10, 15 people. So it's kind of like, I mean, I'm going to joke, of course, when females say they'll do something, then they're probably going to do it more than a man. So the show rate was good. Like I said, I made loads of things up in my head and whatever, but conversion rate was 8.
8 people
signed up. 8 people, yeah,
okay.
out of 140, so we weren't a great conversion rate there. So I reviewed it, and I looked at it, and it's interesting, isn't it? I was watching Andy at Power to Achieve do his pitch, and I was like, that Lion King shit, I can't do that. He's prancing about the bloody stage, do you know what I mean? I'd never even seen Lion King, to be honest. I mean, I feel like I've watched it, you know what I mean? And I said to Dee, I'm not doing that shit. And we were in Dubai, actually. Where's lovely Asif? Where's Asif gone? Hello, Asif. Asif was there. We went over to do...
Asif's coming from Dubai?
Yeah.
All the way from Dubai, ladies and gentlemen.
And on the way back, I'd flown to Manchester, Dee was going to London. I looked on the movies, and, I mean, probably done a bit of travelling recently, so I'm like, yep, seen it. And then bloody Lion King came up, and I thought, well, do you know what? I might as well. So I watched it. I thought, it's quite a good movie, this. Should have watched it in the last 25 years. So I thought, okay, I'll do a version of that. Oh my gosh, like, one, I had so much fun, and they had so much fun. I mean, I was knackered. I said to Andy halfway through, he does the, oh, I am trying. And I was like that, I am trying. And it taught me 2 things. Just fucking do, if someone's doing something great, just follow them, right? Just don't try to reinvent the wheel. And also, stories do open people up. And I think that is probably one of the main reasons why the conversion rate on the second one was 16 people. So double the conversion. Yeah.
Good. And we've got more coming up, obviously.
Yeah, we've got another one, 24th, I think it is, of March. Please don't come. But thanks anyway. Send your love. And one in Manchester on the 14th of April, I think it is, yeah. And then obviously planning at least one a month. As long as obviously the conversion rate stays up. Otherwise I'll be replaced, no doubt.
Cheryl Chapman, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Yeah. So it's another reason why I think this will work, is that we've got somebody else already converting and doing it. So we'd build an event for you with a specific name. It's different to everybody else, because we might have, I don't know, X number of people sign up to be a licensee for doing this. We don't want you all competing with each other, if you like, with the same brand named event. The event has its own name and its own theme, if that makes sense. All right? And it's branded around you separately. So the idea is that how it works is that you'll be taught how to do it. What I'm thinking in my head about the training part is that, and again, just because you're trained doesn't mean you'll be that you will pass. So I'm thinking charging like a rate for a fee for the training, which you'll love anyway. You'll learn massive from it anyway. And then from the people that get trained on it, then a subset of those will obviously pass at that time the standard to say, yes, you are now can buy the license for it. Just because you don't pass first time round doesn't change things. It just means at that moment you're not ready. So what I'm thinking is there's a training piece, which might be 2 or 3 days. It'll be weekday, that training, not weekend, because I don't have any weekends left. And the ones I do are just too precious. So it'll be during the week. And then after that initial training, there will be a big gap, not a big gap, but a gap of weeks. And then the second piece coming back will more be the evaluation part, if that makes sense. Okay? So the in-between time is you guys to practice, perform, get it ready, watch videos of me to enhance the actual presentation itself to get it all down, and then you'll come and perform in those the second round, and I will select a few people to do so. The idea is geographically you'll own a geographical area. I won't be selling London, that's mine, okay? So London is not an area that whoever gets selected can do the event in, because we do events in London. I'd be competing with my own self, if that makes sense. So it would be another area somewhere, okay? I'll figure the geographical bit out. It's another thing I haven't quite figured out yet. Yeah, and so the idea is there'll be a fee for the training, and I'm thinking about 5K for the training piece in of itself, about that number, with no payment plan, okay? So, you know, if you're going to do it, you just have to find the 5K to throw into it. And again, it's not really well thought out, but that's kind of what I'm thinking, 5K. And then another fee on top of that if you graduate from that and become to buy the license, which is probably another 5K, I'm thinking. So not much. So 10K would be a total investment, indeed. And then the 5K is a yearly investment to keep the license, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to you? Mm-hmm. That's the thought process. So how does it work financially for you? What's the other? That's the cost side. What's the how do I make money side? So the make money side is so you put on your own events. Now there are 2 choices for that. Either you can do the marketing yourself for the event. Obviously, we can teach you how to do the marketing piece, and you can do it yourself, or we can do it rather, Matt can do it for you, like he does with Grace Stage. Of course, the funding of the ads themselves would be you rather than us. Does that make sense? Okay. So either but obviously, if you do have us do the fund it, rather, if you do us do the ads for you, there's an additional cost on top of the cost of the ad to pay Matt a bit of money to actually run, and myself, Josh, to run the ad campaigns for you, if that makes sense. So I'll say that again because it was confusing. Of course, the cost you've got is you've got your ad spend, and like I just said, for Grace's Stage, I think we're working at about £10 per registration, right? But I don't know what your registration could be less. It could be more. I don't know. Especially if you're geographically in an area, it might go down actually potentially because it's even more targeted. I don't know. That's the unknown. I can't tell you what it's going to be. But broadly speaking, maybe somewhere between maybe £20 per registration. Sorry, bad writing. £20 per reg. Your start rate for these events, as you know, is not 100%. it's probably going to be, well, actually the chart rate for Grace Estate is really good, but I would say if you think 15%, and again, we will write all the emails that need to be written for the follow-up sequence, or rather the show-up sequence, I should say, to go out, to make sure that people don't just register and then 3 weeks later they're meant to turn up to an event, they're going to forget. So it needs to be a show-up sequence. We can write the emails for that. And we can even suggest you making some videos around the public speaking content you'll be giving, such that they've got a connection to you by watching some of your content around my content, if that makes sense, before they turn up. Again, this is not all, remember, I haven't got all this done in my head yet, so this is again why it's just let's do a two-step process where let me show you what it is, but don't buy it yet, because I'm not sure if we're doing this yet. And if you do it, by the way, it's going to be a conversation that we'll have with one of my team anyway. So it's, you'll know what you're doing before we get into it. So you've got your ad spend, that's your responsibility. If obviously Matt's running the ad campaign for you, then there's a premium on top of the cost of the advert to pay for Matt to run it for you. And I think that's something like 10 to 15% on top of the ad spend, so that Matt has income to make sure that he's getting paid, and we can afford to do that. Otherwise, you just do it yourself, which is fine. Obviously, the cost, you've got to do room hire. That's your bit as well. But locally, where you are in your city, you're probably going to be something like £500 probably for a smallish room to begin with, because again, we're not going to suggest you go into it beginning with hoping that 150 people are going to turn up. It's probably going to begin with 30, 40, 50 people are turning up maybe. Does that make sense? Because you want to start small to begin with, but it might get higher in the end. So room hire will be yours as well, and I guess that's probably it. So what do you make? So if you're selling, Speakers University sold at 2k plus VAT, so essentially it's 2k because the VAT obviously, neither of us are going to get any chunk of that. And then I'm going to pay you 75% of the value of that £2,000 is yours. Does that make sense? So approximately something like £1,500, give or take, is your per sale revenue that you make to keep as yours. Make sense? Why am I doing that? Because I get 25% firstly, but plus obviously I've got the back end, haven't I, to upsell to Academy. So that's where I can make my decent profit from that. The reason I'm doing this, or potentially doing it, is because I know my stuff works. I've got a great network of people. I've got great speakers, but I'm running out of weekends for Andy Harrington to do it. Does that make sense? Now, I could do the trainer route and just do it all myself and train trainers to do it. The problem is you guys are all entrepreneurial. So maybe this entrepreneurial way, maybe that works better. So that's what I'm wrestling with in my head. Do I just say, no, I'm going to train trainers instead? And as a trainer, you'd only get paid 15% of that. And I do the filling. Does that make sense? So I'm kind of not sure which way I'm going to go at the moment. Okay? I'm not sure. But I kind of like this route for me because it's less risk for me. Does that make sense? In honesty, it's less risk for me. The biggest risk is choosing the right people. Because you don't want people representing your brand not the right people, so that's a key thing. And also just making sure that we can deliver on this. Because otherwise, yes, fine, you paid 10,000, great, I might have a nice chunk of money coming in, but you're going to get pretty upset if you can't make the 10 grand plus back, aren't you? Yes or no, guys? Yes. So that's why the selection process must be done well. But I'm pretty confident about it because I say we've already got like a template that this is working for somebody else selling what I'm doing, both from the fact that people are signing up to the events and it's converting as well. So now I'm thinking, wow, okay, how else could we do this? Obviously, for those of you who are not in country, you're in different countries as well, there's another opportunity for you as well because maybe, that's a good way of us branching into other countries too. So anyway, there's loads of those things. So in essence, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking 5k for the training piece. Because because that's going to be pretty intensive for all of us to do, 5K. And then from that, those people who are selected to be able to become the licensee probably pay another 5K at this stage. And that 5K probably gets more expensive. If I run that, as it starts to prove itself, I probably won't charge 5K in the future for new people coming in. It'd probably be 10K, to be honest. Because if I suddenly see, wow, all these guys are making £100,000, I go like, well, hang on, you can afford to charge them a bit more money. But in the beginning, if I only charge 5, then your ability to make your 5K back is easier. So I guess there's a first mover advantage on that as well, because I want to play safe in the beginning. So there we are. That's it, really, in a nutshell, I think, of what I've got in my mind. Did anybody have any questions first about that, to fill in any blanks in, because it's not a presentation I've done previously. Does it all make sense? So far, yes. Yeah, okay, there are some questions coming now. Thank you, Stan. Can just keep your hand up and then Stan knows where you are. Yeah. Okay, good. So I'll come back. We'll get to you. Yeah. Once this question finished, raise hand again and I'll come around. Yes.
Just at the beginning, you mentioned a possibility of adding it to a package that we already have. So
yeah, not so much adding it as a package, although I hadn't considered that might be an option. More just like, okay, let's say you're running an event, which is designed to help you get new customers, correct? Well, then you've already got a captive audience at that point, haven't you? You've already paid for them to be in the room. So why not just extend the day and add another hour and a half, 2 hours on it, and just kind of add that presentation at the end of what you normally do, and then sell that? Because it's just another way of maximising the return on any investment you've already made to get the people in that room, if that makes sense. So you would already have people coming to your room to do what? Sorry, microphone not in the way, so I beg your pardon. Again, I know people in this room can hear, but the camera can't necessarily.
So I'm just thinking, I've got a group of other aesthetic practitioners. I'm helping them building up their aesthetics business, and I think speaking is a great way to help with that. So they already, some of them are paying me a mentorship program. I'm just thinking of adding this on to what I do for them.
Correct.
How would that work?
Yeah, so it can either be added as a package, and of course you've then got to charge them another $2,000 on top for that level, if that makes sense. Otherwise, otherwise you won't get your 75%, and I don't get my 15%, 25%. Bad maths. And while that would work, or you just do another presentation and add it as a separate individual add-on by itself. And it would work really well in this instance if you think about it, because you're a walking, this is our point, isn't it? You are a walking, talking advert for it, because you're teaching how to do aesthetics better as a business. That's obviously what you've done yourself. So all you're doing is, rather than you try to teach public speaking yourself and try to, give this level of support and this network that's built me up 15, 20 years to build up, in essence, you're just saying, this is what I've done, this is the route to go down. And you're getting paid 75%. So your cost of marketing is going to be zero, because they're already in the room already. Does that make sense?
Can I do that in London?
Yes, that's fine, because the original reason why they're coming wouldn't be for public speaking training. So that in itself is fine. It's just if we then advertise an event in London for them to come to about public speaking per se, then I would be bastardising my own solution, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
That's not the greatest word in the world, but you know what I mean. Next is Mihor, please. Thank you.
Hi, Andy. When we started the business, we ran preview events called Conquer Your Fear of Public Speaking.
It's called, sorry?
Conquer Your Fear of Public Speaking.
Yes.
Okay. And that we got really good feedback from that. And the upsell to that was an event called Present Yourself Perfectly.
Yeah.
Based on the NLP trainers training model. So it's more like stance and posture and stuff.
Got it. So it's more presentation. In my model, it's just the blue presentation skills piece. Yeah.
We dropped that because I wanted to focus on our personal development side.
Yeah.
And we never brought that back down.
Yeah.
But now I'm looking at that as a perfect model to upsell from that directly to that work.
Yeah, of course it would. Yeah, it worked really well. The thing, this is why you want to add this for you, by the way, and why this is useful for many of you is because, you can sit down, it's fine, is that many of you you're selling something that's a soft skill. As in what you're selling isn't something that makes money. You're selling something that's better health, personal development, spirituality, whatever, right? Which is a soft skill. And the problem with that, not the problem with that, the limitation of that is that people only pay X amount of money for it, sadly, because they don't think, because they can't justify that they're going to make the money back on the return. But this is a business thing that you attach to it that has a tangible, hard evidence result. I will make my money back if I apply this technique to it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Which in essence might, because that's what I did with Power to Achieve. If you think about Power to Achieve, it's a mindset event, but at the event I sell you business stuff. So if you're doing mindset stuff, or you're doing some other more softer-based skill, if you add this as well, then what it potentially does is give something to buy that they believe will ultimately make the money, and they can justify the purchase better. Same thing with NLP, it's the same thing. It's like, it's a soft skill, because it's more personal development or become a coach. What this does, you're teaching them effectively, if you become an NLP coach or practitioner, obviously it's the same as you're now teaching them how do you win clients one-to-many rather than one-to-one. That becomes the justification for how it's aligned with perhaps what you're already doing, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Raise your hand if it does. Good. Thank you, Michael. So I think it's perfect for you, especially also because you're in Northern Ireland, and I'm not there already. So that's like an open playing field for you. That's a no-brainer. Yes, please.
Thanks, Andy. You've sort of answered my first question just on how you add it into a package you're already offering. The second question is really just...
Is that microphone live? You're hearing that, are you? Fine, thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry. The show-up rate you've got as 15%.
Yes.
For those 15% that then attend, what's the average conversion rate?
Oh, we just actually heard an example from Cheryl was about 12% last event.
Right, okay.
So if we do the math, it's good. Actually, we could do the math quickly.
Yeah.
So let's do the worst case scenario, that it's £20 per registration. Let's say you got 300 registrations, and let's say 15% are going to show up to the event. Yeah. Well, that is 45 people? Is that right? Yes. Correct?
Yep.
45 people. If you converted 12%, what is that? How many?
5 people.
5? Let's say 5 people. So 5 people at 2k equals 10k. 75%. 7,500. Make sense? So that's your income. And you've got registrations at 20. How much does that work out to? 20 times 300 is 6k.
Yeah.
There you are. So your profit on that event would be 7.5, which would not be a good business model, in essence. So therefore, either we would have to look at this conversion obviously either needs to go up, that conversion needs to go up, or we have to look at a different monetization model, which is that's why I'm reticent. I want to make sure that this works.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, we are making it work, obviously, ourselves, because I've said the registration currently is £10. You see? And that's a different ballgame.
Yeah.
Right? But I wanted to err on the side of caution. But even that way round, you walk away with 1,500 quid at a kind of worst-case scenario at that point.
Yeah. Well, it still works a bit if you're running your own event or I'm running my own event.
If you're running your own event, then none of that cost exists.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You already got them in the room. So it's just an added thing. But this is a very much worst-case scenario, that it's 20 quid per registration. And I think the show-up rate will be higher based on it being more local.
Yeah.
Because people then, if they've got to travel all the way into London from miles away, the show rate's not as good, typically.
And just on the like the regions and that, are you thinking in terms of counties or I mean, I'm from Brighton, so it'd be like,
Yes.
I love Brighton.
Yes, probably counties.
Okay,
Because the jurisdiction is already, the boundary lines are already there.
Yeah.
So we might as well utilise those than anything else.
Yeah.
And then you've got your towns, haven't you, within, I suppose. You know, you've got your Hastings, you've got your, you know, your Brighton, etc. Yeah.
Okay. And sorry, just one more. If you were using Matt and Josh to do the advertising, the marketing,
Yeah.
and then you were doing it as a shared event with my own event, could I use Matt and Josh then to fill both events? Because if they're going to be on the same day,
Yes.
at the same event, and they're sort of connected, because that's
Potentially,
the point,
yes.
you could do that as
Yeah,
well.
but again, the monetisation model, I can't remember what Matt is. I haven't asked him what he charges on top, but I think it's something like 10 or 15% on top of the ad spend itself.
Right, so you
Make
can add
sense?
that onto your own.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Correct.
No, thanks.
But again, this is why I want to pause here rather than just get you guys to go and do it, because we have to look at the monetisation model to make sure that it really does work. But the reality is, and this is a good lesson for all of us, which those of you have probably had it already, the reality is sales are not profit. All right? And in this industry, specifically, it's very easy to get caught up in looking at revenue and getting all excited about the sales you make. But the reality is most businesses operate on about a 10% profit margin. Big companies, the huge ones, the blue chips, operate on about a 3 to 4% profit margin. So, yeah, in real terms, 10% is okay. You want to be aiming somewhere towards 20%, really, for us, would be a really good one. So it might be we have to tweak these numbers. So whatever happens before we do it, this model will be tweaked in such a way that it makes sure you do make money. Because I will make money on the back of it. If you chuck 5 people into my event, I will make money on the back end. Does that make sense? I will. So we just have to make sure the model we come up with is one that's sustainable. Because there's no point me doing it and you don't make money, because you just stop doing it. And then the mission doesn't work. Because, you know, the whole point of me doing this is so that you keep on doing it. It's lucrative, good enough, such that you start feeding Speakers University for me, if that makes sense, as well as. So if that doesn't work financially for you, it won't work financially for me. So we have to play with these numbers potentially to look at how it works, okay? Good. But given what I've said so far, raise your hand if you're interested in going to another level or stage at it at this stage to consider doing it, please. Can you raise your hand? All right, fantastic. So, yeah, we might as well take a break now, actually, because I was going to do 11:30, but it's close enough now to do that. So, we need to collect those names if we can. So, oh yeah, thanks, Max. Did you have something else to say, Cheryl? Sorry, yeah, one more thing. And then when we come back, we're moving straight on to case study story.
It's just about lunches.
Lunches, okay,
so
yeah.
lunch, the hotel offers a sandwich offer, which is the £5, or an offer for a 2-course dinner, which is £15. You will need to buy the vouchers in the break.
Where?
Now, just in the bar area.
Okay.
And there is other options, of course. There's a Marks and Spencer's just over the road.
Fine.
That was it.
That's it. Okay, good. So I was going to break at 11:30, but natural thing to do. There's no point in me getting into case study story now and breaking in 15 minutes' time. So if you'd like to, again, there's no obligation with this, by the way. This is just a next step conversation. So if you want to express an interest at this stage, do put your name on the sheet, which Max, the lovely Max. Oh, by the way, Max has just had a baby, so let's give Max there we are. So his son was born really recently. His son's name is Leonardo. Amazing. So we're very proud of Max. So anyways, if you put your name down, which is at the end of that table, Max, can you just stay where that thing is so people know where it is? Jot your name down. It just means if we decide to do it, and once we've fixated these numbers better, we'll come back to you with a proposal, and you can say yes or no to it at another time. It just helps us to find you when you're ready, okay? Let's take a break for 20, back at 11:35, and also go buy your lunch as well. All right, thanks. Come back shortly. All right, thank you so much. Welcome back. So, let's get down to work. So, the main focus of today from now on, and thanks for the little advert there before we got into the work now, was ultimately how do you build this client story? Because, as I said previously when I first started, some of you, like the expert positioning story you've created doesn't quite work maybe. Now, the sort of reason why it might not is this. Look, if you are, as I am, if you're trying to teach people to become like you, as in you guys want to become speakers like me, then my personal story of how I became a speaker works. It's relevant. However, if you're not teaching people to become like you, then your story of why and how you became what you do may not be exactly relevant. And so what might be relevant that's better is this client/case study story. And the difference is this, is that a personal story positions you, a client story positions your UBS. So I'll say that again. A personal story positions you as the authority. A client story kind of positions your solution instead, which might, as I say, be more relevant. So if somebody's buying your solution to get a particular result, as opposed to buying your solution to become like you, then a client story could well work better. So what we're going to look at now is how do you design it, and how do you perform that client study story, utilising what you already know, which is the Tri-Summit storytelling system, because there are going to be some distinctions. All right, so let's look at those now. So let's build upon kind of some things that you already know. So firstly, let's talk about the character trifecta. So, the character trifecta says, can you just turn my mic up ever so slightly, please, James? 1, 2, thank you. So we know that the hero has to have an adversary, and there is also a sage. So in this story, you are the sage. Because in your own story, you are the hero. It is your journey. It is your transformation. Because the hero only becomes the hero of the story, per se, because of their transformation. And that's perfectly fine when it's your personal story, so they can model that journey. But if, for example, the person doesn't want to go on the same journey you've been on, become like you, they just want a result that you can give them, then therefore the role changes and you play this role instead. Now here's the problem that has a solution to it that we can discuss, but if you don't understand how this is a problem, you might get a bit confused, is that typically, of course, Act 1 of your story is where these two characters come into conflict with each other. Does that make sense? Raise your hand if you understand. And of course, you're not there. Because in your story, one of those characters was you. So obviously it's kind of easy to do the scene because, well, you were there. So the question becomes, if you weren't, because you wouldn't have known that was happening with these two people when it was happening, because you didn't meet this person until later on. Does that make sense? Raise your hand if you understand. So you'll see how I solve that problem in a minute, okay? And still stay within the confines of how we do it in the Tri-Summit storytelling system. So that was interesting. All right. So what I'm going to do here, or attempt to do, is show you how I've done it, so you can almost look over my shoulder to see how I might build one of these stories. Okay, so what I'll do is, I'll do a whole Act 1 on this sheet of paper, I'll do a whole Act 2 on that sheet of paper, and then a whole Act 3 on that sheet of paper, so I don't run out of space, and so it's easy to see. Okay, so the first thing you've got to do is, you've got to think, okay, what's the purpose of this story? Right? Like, in the end, what is the purpose of the story? So, you tell me. It's a client story. What's the purpose of the story? What's the gain? What's the advantage? Why are we doing it? Position what? Yes, that's true. So you want to position yourself as an expert. Good. So that's number one. So we want to be positioned as the expert person. Yes, what else? So position your UBS as a solution. Good. That's the second thing. Let's keep going. What other things are there? Position, okay, now you're getting closer. Position problem. What do you mean? Dig deeper. Keep going. Yeah, so we want to position the... Okay, fine, I'll take it. So position the problem, but what problem? So it's the client problem, yes? Now, should your client problem be the exact same problem that the target market is sitting there currently having, yes or no? Yes. Or at least generically, if not exactly the same, it must be relatable to. Great. So now we've got three things. So we got, A, we need a story that positions us at the end as the authority. 2, it must position our solution, as in our UBS, our methodology. 3, it must, in Act 1, of course, position the problem that the audience are facing, and obviously this client represents the same problem. What else? And this is the biggest one of all.
Why client pick you?
Huh?
Why the client pick you?
Why should the client pick you is also important, but that's almost like those three things we've already talked about will end up getting that result. So I'm looking for a new category, please.
What happens if they don't take action?
Yes, now you're getting closer. Very good. So a consequence, let's write that down as a sub-answer to this answer. It's connected. Now, hang on. I'm going to help Peter to get the answer, all right, specifically. I don't know why, but I know Peter's been elite. So, Pete, think about the big thing you learned at elite when you did it. Thank you. Say it loudly.
Pre-handling objections.
There you go. Number 4 is you pre-handle all the objections. So, in the story, we ultimately want all of the hesitations and reasons why somebody doesn't say yes to be reflected in this story because the client had the same reservations. Does that make sense? Raise your hand if you understand. And therefore, because, I mean, it's a story, people aren't knowing you're selling to them, they just don't know. Because as far as they're concerned, it's just a story. But what it ultimately does is position that these objections or beliefs, because that's what they really are in fact false beliefs. And that they are not true. And how we see that in the story. Does that make sense? Yeah. Now you know those 4 things, now you have to find someone to make that story work for. Right? Because, of course, choosing someone. Now, obviously, I can choose anybody on these walls here. Because every one of these walls, that's a 7-figure peeps, right? And these are the 6-figure peeps. So 7-figure family and 6-figure family members. As in these guys that made $1 million, at least, collectively since their time in the academy. Or 6 figures. And by the way, if you have made 7 figures and you're not on that wall, you need to let me know. If you're on that wall and you haven't made 7 figures, you better let me know. Similarly on the 6 figures as well. And I should say that's what we do. So at the next Academy Awards dinner, which is in September, there will be, if you're in the 5-figure family, you'll receive a certificate at that point for being in the 5-figure family. If you get to the 6-figure by then, you'll receive a certificate and a trophy. And if you're in the 7-figure family, you'll get a certificate, a trophy, and you'll be fitted with a jacket with the Professional Speakers Academy logo on. That becomes your jacket to wear as part of you being the 7-figure family. Make sense? Right? Good. Anyway, I could choose any one of these people because they are, of course, success stories. Does that make sense? Yes or no, guys? Yeah. But I want to choose the person. I want to choose the success story that most will give me the result based on what I just said as the parameters to work. Does that make sense? Okay. So my best student so far, arguably, that fits that criteria, that has made the most money probably is Paul Preston at this time. So I'm going to use his story and his journey with me to demonstrate how to construct the story first, if that makes sense. Is that all right? Yeah. So let's do that together, okay? And in doing this, you might also have an insight to how I do a story of any type of story as well, as in how I do it, because I never write it out like an essay, right? I know some people do, and that's fine. I don't personally do that because what I never want to be doing on stage is, as I'm like performing it, is have to think in my head and see some words. I never want to see text written out. So I never want to be visualizing a page with blue ink on it or black ink. Instead, I want to see a picture in my head because I want to be there rather than dissociated. Okay, so let's draw our big first mountain. Okay, so now I have to find a problem that represents a problem that Paul had, that is a problem that people want to climb out of. So what is the big problem for me that people have, that most people want to sign up for me for, is they want to make money, right? So the opposite of making money is not having any money, right? So it turns out that that's the situation for Paul, right? As we know, there was a moment in his life, in his own story, where he kind of lost it all. Does that make sense? Yeah. And I want people to believe that no matter where you are, if you follow my systems and solutions, whether you're already successful and want to go higher, or you're at a lost situation, that you can go higher. I also want people to understand and think, well, no matter what, he can help me. No matter what situation I'm in, like if I stick around this guy enough, he's going to make me successful somehow. He's going to believe in me, even if I don't believe in myself. That's a big thing I like to say about myself, is I can lend you my beliefs if you don't have the right ones yet. So that also works. So actually I can kind of use Paul's actual story for Act 1. But how do I tell it because I wasn't there, right? Okay, so firstly, the biggest problem we had is that he lost his Act 1 in his own story is that he lost his recruitment company, right? Now I could use that same loss. That still works for me because it's a place of, okay, he started with nothing. So that's a good problem for everyone to start with. They're at a place of nothing, because some people aren't starting from nothing, but if you can start and work from nothing and make your way back, that's a good hero story for me. So if I think about his story, so I'm just going to my notes here. Sorry? Say? No, indeed. But if I think about his story, then we know that Paul's journey begins with the loss of his recruitment company. And that story works for me because he's already got an adversary in it. And there's a loss at the end of it. My biggest thing I have to figure out is, because I wasn't there, because when Paul performs it, he's one of the characters. How do we do it if I'm not one of the characters? We have to behave like a fly on the wall. That's how we have to be. So, we've got the adversary, which is going to be David Green. That's the insolvency practitioner. And when you do your story, again, you don't really want to be writing the whole text out like this. You want to map it like this instead. Just map the story. Don't write it out in long form. If you want to write in long form, you can, if that works for you. It's not necessarily the way I do it. I kind of bullet point it. So we know the main point of the story is the loss is going to be the loss of recruitment company. I'm going to write up here, loss equals recruitment company goes down, yeah? So look what I've done first. I've figured out what the loss is. So my first thing is, where's the loss first? So in Act 1, I go to the loss, because that's where the Act 1 finishes. So if you do Act 1, what is the loss your client experiences? Why? Why do you need the loss? Why do you need the setback or the problem? Because it relates to why they're going to ultimately end up finding you. Does that make sense? Okay? And the other key part here is the conflict, which we've already got here with this conversation with David Green. We need a timestamp, so I know this is going to take place in 2008. That's when that takes place. So now what I think is, okay, now I've got this conflict between these two people. It leads to this loss. Now what I've got to do is think, okay, all right, so now I need some composition. So what do I think out first? Okay, scene first. So I think scene, right? So what's the scene? The scene for Act 1. The scene for Act 1 is going to be in his office. So I'm going to call it office scene. Chrome name. Board table. Plush office. So those are things that I can see if I was actually there. If I wanted to add something, I can add sound. And I'm going to choose eerie silence. Feelings, tension. So I'm just thinking save the scene, yes? Sounds, or smells, auditory, feelings. Smells, I could add smell if I want to, but I don't think I need to here because I think it's rich enough as it is. Then I've got to think conversation. So the next thing I think is in this scene is the conversation. This is how I build any scene, guys. So now I know what the story composition is, as in it's going to be about this conflict between these two people. I think, okay, I now need a scene for that. And next I need to know what the conversation is. That's it. And while I'm having the conversation, I want to build in some suspense. Because that's also a key component of it. And that would lead to the loss. This will make the scene short, tight, powerful, dramatic. So Paul's already kind of done this for me already, but if you hadn't, I'd have to, in conversation with Paul as his client, as his coach, I would know this story already. Because I need to know his history to help somebody, right? So the conversation is going to be between him and David Green. And it's important that the audience don't like the villain. All right? We want them to not like the villain here. So we need to depict the character. So remember, when we got characters in the scene, here's what's going to have to happen. Unusually, because I'm not Paul Preston, I have to describe Paul Preston as well. In a normal scene, because he's there, you know what he looks like already. I don't really have to describe, if I was him, if Paul was telling the story, he doesn't have to describe himself so much. But in this case, I will. I've got to describe both characters. So I've got to set it up in such a way that you cheer for Paul and jeer for the other guy. Right? So characters. I've got to think about, okay, visually, what do they look like? What are they going to sound like? And what are they like, as in, as a person? So personality. And what emotions might be going on. And this conversation ultimately has to have some conflict in it. It can't be chit-chat. So I just need to find a slice of a moment in time. I don't want to have an hour's conversation, because that's probably what it was. But I have to find the 20 seconds of content, the 30 seconds of conversation, the 1 minute of conversation that will depict and represent the hour that it probably took. Otherwise, it's just boring, huh? So characters, I've got to think about what they are like, okay? And I want to build in some suspense. So how do I make some suspense in here? What's suspense made up of? Unknowns. So there has to be some unknown in it. Because the audience have to fill in the blanks in a story. If the story is so easy for the audience to understand what's going on, without them having to do a little bit of guesswork, then there's no real drama, there's no real suspense, because it's not really like a story. Remember, a story hints and implies, it doesn't tell specifically, otherwise that's content. Stories are inductive, not deductive. Right? The difference being that deductive, you tell everyone what it's about and then you move into the detail. Inductive, start in the middle of nowhere, and only as the story expands do you go, oh, now I see. So you don't want to give the game away too early. It needs to sort of unfold, otherwise there's no vested interest in them continuing to listen as the story unfolds. We want the questions to be raised in their mind as the story goes and be answered as the story continues. Okay, so then, now I've got the setup, I need to know the speech part, the actual conversation. Now the setup is there for the characters, because here's what's got to happen. You have to make a picture. As the audience, I have to get you making a picture in your mind. I am seeing that picture. All I'm getting you to do is see the same thing I'm seeing. So when I'm doing a scene, I'm never ever anywhere other than in it and just telling you what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. Does that make sense? Yes or no, guys? Yes. When I'm doing it, all I'm doing is showing you what's in my head and telling you what I'm hearing as I eavesdrop on the conversation. Which means I don't need to write it out. I don't, because it's in me already. I'm experiencing it. I'm there. So then it's the speech part. What is each person going to say to each other in order for the audience to kind of get a handle on what's happening here? The speech must tell the story, not the dialogue. The dialogue does not, sorry, back up. The narration doesn't tell the story so much. The dialogue does.
There will be a monologue part.
I beg your pardon?
Monologue, so what the hero is saying to himself.
As in internal dialogue,
As a speech, yeah.
is one of the options. Sometimes, well, speech is either one of two things, conversation between two people or inner dialogue. But it's best if the inner dialogue or the inner dilemma happens in Act 2, not Act 1. In Act 1, it's external conflict. In Act 2, it is internal conflict, normally. If you start with internal conflict in Act 1, the audience get very confused. So it's best to start with the external enemy, not the internal enemy. Does that make sense? Otherwise, we don't know who the adversary is. Because the adversary doesn't really want to be yourself, your own inner thoughts. We don't want that to be the adversary.
Can there be two adversaries?
As long as they're in different scenes.
Oh, right, okay.
Or they can be two, but probably one per... No, you can have two. You can have two, it's fine. There's no reason why you can't have two. Yeah, it could work. Yeah. But two people could be the adversaries, but the problem that they represent or what they're saying must be the same. You can't have one person saying like this problem with this person and this problem with this person. It must be the same problem and both people are attacking you about it. Does that make sense? That's all right. But if they're attacking you about two different problems, two different things, then that might get confusing. So the speech has to tell the story. And as the audience listens to that speech, they get it and they understand. Right? We still need to have narration as well. Sometimes we use narration as a way of quickly moving forward in time. But then when we get to speech again, it slows down. We shine a light on that moment in time again. Does that make sense? But then when we move the story on, X number of years, if we go from this situation to, 5 months later, then what happened in those 5 months might be narrated in something that takes 30 seconds to say. Does that make sense? And then we get to another point where something's worth slowing down again, which will represent our Act 2 potentially. So in Act 1, I will come to you. In Act 1, you, as the sage, are not there. Do you understand me? Yes or no, guys? Yeah. You are not there. But you're going to represent the scenario as if the audience are there. As if the audience are there. So let me think about it. How might it start? It might say something like, it's October 2008. And sitting around the old wooden oak boardroom table, looking at the Chrome Company logo. Go back to that. Looking at the Chrome Company logo in the plush offices of Active Resourcing is a man who looks rather down on his luck. Dishevelled, well-dressed, every part the professional, but I can see that he's nervous. He's biting his nails. He's tried to avoid this moment for some time. So now I've set up the scene. Make sense? Yes. Raise your hand. And I'm not saying I'm there, because it's like I'm viewing backwards. I'm looking backwards at it. But the language is still present tense. Okay? If we want to add in the sound, we could add that part in. We'd say, and there's an eerie silence, an uncomfortable awkwardness. It's like you could cut the atmosphere with a knife. Well, Mr. Preston, run a successful business over the last few years, I see. Rolex watch, I see. David Green, sitting there, enjoying the moment, slick-backed black hair. It almost feels like he's preying on Paul Preston at this time. Your sort normally do. Anyway, we'll be in touch. and he slides his business card across the desk. David Green, insolvency practitioner. Perfect. Now, I'm not there, right? But it still feels like I'm there. Does that make sense? So everything has to be, therefore, in that present tense language. That's the key. So in the same way you'd say it's da-da-da, and sitting, not sat across the table. The word ing says now. The word ed or at suggests happened in past. So we need to use the present tense language. We build the scene, the dramatistics of the scene. We position the adversary in such a way, the characters, the adversary. We know what Paul Preston looks like. We know what the other guy looks like. We know to fight against him. And the dialogue represents a moment in time that has the audience go, I get it. He's about to lose his company. Make sense? Great. Now, Paul's normal story at this point moves on to this story about him becoming a cleaner. That is not going to be my Act 2. Because in Act 2, it's got to move much more forward in time to where he met me. Does that make sense? Yeah. Raise your hand, you understand. Okay? All right, so Act 1 is now nicely done. We've got everything we need. There's a conflict here between him and David Green. There is a loss, and this loss, albeit sometime previously, is the thing that projects him forward, that ultimately leads to me. Okay, good. So, now Act 2. Let's have a different thing about Act 2. All right. So, in Act 2, what I've got to do is ultimately introduce how Paul got to know me. But there's a long time in between when he met me, because he didn't meet me for the first time until 2010, as it happens. So there's 2 years in between. So I've got to do a little bit of segue, and the segue would be what happened in the next 2 years. Does that make sense? Raise your hand if you understand. I'm not going to jump immediately to a scene in 2010. I'm going to do a little bit of segue, which is going to be ultimately the narration of what then happened. So that little bit there is just what happened, which is, as you know, he ended up becoming a cleaner, cleaning toilets for £6 an hour. Why did he do that? Because he lost himself. He felt sorry for himself. So I can just, rather than create a scene about that, because that's the wrong scene for my Act 2, it's the right scene for his Act 2, my Act 2 has to ultimately include me. So I'm not, this bit of narration as the segue, it's not an Act 2, it's just simply a segue to catch up. Then when I go into Act 2 later on, it makes sense. Who's with me so far? Right? So again, you've got to know your client here. Clearly, it's a client story. So what happened is, over the next few years, Paul went missing, and I can say that. So, over the next few years, after losing his recruitment company, Paul Preston lost himself. He lost himself perhaps emotionally, physically, certainly financially. In fact, he felt so sorry for himself, he lost so much self-esteem that rather than be the business owner that had made millions and then lost millions, he took the lowly position of a cleaner. Cleaning toilets, cleaning people's houses for just £6 per hour. That's it. That's my segue done. Make sense? Raise your hands. Yeah. Now, he's got a whole scene about that with John the security guard, etc. And the crisp packets everywhere. That's perfect for his scene. It's not my scene, okay? Because my Act 2 must be ultimately where he met me. Now, what happens at the bottom of Act 2, please? What should be at the... Now we've done the segue now, so Act 1's nicely done. We've got his loss. we've now got the segue, which is the catch-up in time. What should be in the Jet Set Speaker System Tri-Summit storytelling system, what always happens at the base of Act 2, please? Yes. In essence, a holding pattern. A holding pattern. Now, he would argue his holding pattern was him becoming a cleaner, right? But I've got to make his holding pattern one that I break. Do you understand me? Yes or no, guys? I've got to be the one that breaks that pattern because I'm the sage. So the reality of what happened here is that I met Paul in 2010. This is a part of your story you probably don't know. I met Paul in 2010 at a property course which I was speaking at. So I was a guest speaker at that conference. It was actually a John Lee Wealth Dragons event, and Paul Preston was there as kind of he'd done a bit of property investing at the time, not much, and he was there as like a potential new MC for their events. That's when I first met him. And I remember I was selling my Speakers University class. The only reason I'm there as a guest speaker is to sell my Speakers University course. And he would have heard the pitch, but he didn't buy it. That's good for me. I want you to think about that for a minute. He did not buy my course at the time. Make sense? That's good, because that positions what they might do, mightn't it? Yes or no, guys? Yeah. And comes back to the consequence, therefore, of not taking action and doing it. All right? So that I have to build in, or show, or you have to build in to this part here, that the client ultimately doesn't immediately do it. If you say something, you go like, oh, and then they came to my class and it all went up swimmingly well. No, that's not a very good story. There has to be a bit of uncertainty, because that's where we can start introducing all of the objections and beliefs about why they might not have done it. Does that make sense? Raise anything with me? Yeah. Okay. So now what's going to happen is I'm actually going to end up having more than one scene in this act. And actually Act 2 often has more than one scene, because we normally have the scene of the holding pattern, followed later on by the scene which includes the catalyst. Does that make sense? Now, sometimes that can be the same scene, but sometimes there's going to be a gap of time in between. Okay? And that's all right too. So here, Paul actually approached me after I did this presentation, but he didn't buy. So I'm going to... Now, I can't remember the actual conversation, because I wasn't like, I need to remember this for future, right? But I've got a general feel about it. Does that make sense? This conversation happened. The words may not be exactly the same as they happened, but they're close enough. Does that make sense? Remember, it's based on a true story, okay? So don't get too ridiculously hung up on the, this is exactly what happened. But my distortion memory of what happened is something similar to this. So we're going to introduce a conversation of him talking about, because now what's got to happen is, I need to hear, or rather the audience need to hear, through this conversation, something that moves the story on. Right? There's no point just having a conversation that doesn't go anywhere. That's pointless. So in this conversation, he's going to say, I want to be a speaker, because actually that's kind of the route he's on at this point. And I'm going to say, come to Speakers University, but he's not going to do it. So that's the conversation, because that's actually what happened, okay? And in doing so, because remember, at this point, as far as the audience are concerned, they know nothing at this point about Paul Preston becoming a property investor. Does that make sense? Yes or no, guys? Yes. So somehow, because it's not even in the segue either, I've now got to talk to him here, and what he says has got to be something that tells the audience that he's started to become a property investor as his way out. Does that make sense? Yeah. Raise it if you follow. So the conversation is going to sound something like this. And remember, with conversations, always make the audience the recipient. None of this turn side on talking to somebody who isn't actually there. Now, you'll see some people doing that, and maybe we didn't make these distinctions early enough in the university years ago, so people started doing that. But actually, the way to do it is to make the audience, if I'm talking to Paul, I'll make one of you Paul, or more than one of you Paul, maybe. And then when Paul speaks back to me, then I'll obviously become Paul, and I make one of you me, if that makes sense. That means the audience are actually part of the act. They're part of the scene as it unfolds. So what's going to happen here is there'll be a conversation, but it doesn't actually go anywhere, but it must pace something that is a big problem my audience has. So my question to myself is, what objection or what belief does my audience have that stops them that I'm going to have come out of Paul's mouth as one of the reasons why they can't do it? Does that make sense? Okay, so the one that's, he didn't say it, but I know it to be true, is a belief that people say I'm not ready. I'm not enough of an expert yet. Does that make sense? Raise your hand if you understand. Okay? And there's a subplot to this as well, which is going to be about Paul having a lisp. I'm going to build that in as well, because you may or may not have noticed that he does have a lisp, which reflects back on like a fear of, being judged, for example, okay? So I'm going to build that in at some point in this as well. In fact, that's going to be one of my ultimate insights for him as well, because it was in the end. Okay, so we're going to compartmentalise this piece. And we need to build a scene now for this, obviously, because, again, the audience needs to know where they are in time and space. So we're now 2010. And we need a new scene. Now, this took place at the Renaissance Hotel in Heathrow. That is on a road called Bath Road in Heathrow. It took place in the Renaissance Suite, because they have two. Actually, the Renaissance Suite's not there anymore. They've got rid of it. It's something else now. But at the time, the place was called the Renaissance Suite. I'm picturing that place in my mind. It's got very similar wooden, like this on the outside, a few pillars on the edges. It has a green and red, just green with little flecks of red swirly carpet. What else about that room? It has a pink lighting in that room. It's very distinctive, meaning it's got normal lights like this, but it's got an alcove like this, and inside those, the alcove goes all the way around, while these are four independent little alcoves. This one is one big blocky alcove, and it's got a pink fluorescent light that goes all the way around it. Make sense? Mm-hmm. And I'm seeing that in my head right now. Okay? So that's something that I can point out the distinction about that room, so put you in that room as well. There were about 150 people in there that particular day. What else can I say about that space? That's probably enough to anchor you into it. I could talk about the hubbub of the noise of the room, because when we had the conversation, there was lots of other noise in the background because loads of other conversations were taking place. So I could talk about that, but actually to get you in the space. Perfect. All right, so the setup for the scene is, it needs to begin with, I first met Paul Preston in 2010. Because at that moment is the only moment at that point they know you weren't there in the previous scene. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's key to it. Now the story starts to go, okay. That makes sense now. So you've just done your segue, as in catching up in time. And before I then go into Act 2, I'm going to say those first things. I first met Paul Preston in 2010. We are both together in the Renaissance Hotel on Bath Road in Heathrow. In fact, in the Renaissance Suite, the training room inside the Renaissance Hotel. It has a very distinctive green swirly carpet. In fact, this particular room originally used to be a swimming pool. And it was changed for the Olympics because they wanted to build seminar rooms, and so they changed up for the Olympics this, what was hotel swimming pool, into now a training room, which also explains why there's these pillars around the edge and this gap in them, this big space in the middle where the swimming pool used to be. There's a hubbub of a noise in the background. And I'm here because I'm the guest speaker at the Wealth Dragons Property course, teaching people how, of course, to become an amazing professional public speaker so they can get their knowledge, know-how out in the world so that other people can ultimately learn what they know so they can implement it into their lives or their business and grow their company. See what just happened there? Yeah. Right? I just positioned me, didn't I? Yes or no, guys? Without me positioning me, almost. Yes? Stood in front of me is Paul Preston. I'm impressed immediately by the way he looks and also by the way he sounds. I'm not sure whether it's because he has this resonance to his voice, this crystal clearness to his voice, or whether that's kind of mixed in with the fact he has this really small, almost imperceptible lisp as well. Hi, Andy, I really enjoyed your talk. It was amazing. Yes, I've been doing this property thing for a little while now. I bought a few properties. I'm doing all right. Actually, I'm here because these are the guys, one of the guys I learned from originally, Wealth Dragons. And they've asked me if I want to come back and do some sort of presenting and MC work. I see. Fantastic. That's a really good idea. But let me ask you a question. Why do you want to be somebody else's mouthpiece? Surely you've already learned how to do this. Why don't you go out teaching this yourself? Why don't you go out there and create your own clients and customers to teach? Yeah. What's the hesitation, Paul? Well, the thing is, I've only bought like 2 or 3 properties. I don't really consider myself an expert yet. I probably, need to buy a few more properties and then I'll sort of, I guess I'm not ready yet, I guess, is what I'm saying. I see. Well, isn't it true, though, that you've already learned some things you could pass on to other people already? When will you be ready, Paul? When will you personally be ready then? Have you bought did you enroll in my Speakers University class? And a long silence. I felt like I ought to breach the silence. Paul, I'm sure you'll be very successful anyway, whatever you do. Listen, I have to go now. I've got to go back to my kids. I wish you all the best. Good luck. See you sometime soon. Perfect. So what just happened there? Do you see that? So I've set up the scene nicely. So I put you in time and space, 2010. So we know that is in relation to 2008, 2006, beg your pardon, whatever it was. Did I say 2006 or 8? 8, wasn't it? 2008, sorry. So it's 2 years later. We've caught up with what happened in the 2 years. We know Paul's now sort of flipped to become a property investor. Does that make sense? And we've now positioned his hesitation, the fact that he doesn't think he's ready. You guys already know now that that's what I teach, presenting, public speaking. I position that as well. And now what's going to happen is he's not going to buy my Speakers University. Brilliant, because he thinks he's not ready. Then what's going to happen is the segue between these two scenes, but not the act, because it's two scenes in the same act, is me saying, like, I didn't see Paul again until. The next time I saw Paul Preston, was in 2015. 5 years later. At my Public Speakers University training. I didn't know that he had enrolled in the program. We have literally normally about 70 to 100 people coming to these trainings. What just happened? I've just created a picture in your mind, haven't I? All right? So, I don't always know who is going to be signing up, who is enrolled in the training. But I immediately remembered and recognized him. Got it? Perfect. All right, so now I should build this scene. And this particular training took place in the Thistle Hotel in Heathrow. So now I can build that scene, which also is on Bath Road. But it's just a different hotel. Who's been in that hotel before? So you know what it's like, right? So what would I say about it? Okay, so I know that room is called the Longford Suite. You might not have noticed that, but it says it on the little plaque on the wall, Longford Suite, because they have another one across the way called the Aviation Suite, which is the much bigger room. So I can talk about the Longford Suite. What else can I say about that room? I could talk about it being a bit outdated, the decor, because it is. I can talk about the space, how big it is. But ultimately, I probably don't want to talk about the decor being like that, because that reflects badly on me, doesn't it? As a selection of training venue, right? Truth is, it's a good price. But it's a good space, because it has all this, what I will talk about is all this breakout space. Because that's a really good thing about it, is because all that space in like the extra conference suite outside means we can have all the pods. So I can now start talking about that, and what am I doing? Building a picture in your mind again of how it works, yes? Of all these speaking stations, etc., yeah? Perfect. So what I'm going to do is going to build that, I'm going to build that in. So I'm building that image, and then again, I just need a snapshot in time. And the snapshot we're going to get to here is going to be Paul creating a UBS around cleaning. Now I want you to think about that for a minute, okay? So what that means is, all this time he was doing property investing, he was still a cleaner at the same time. In fact, the truth is he was like a cleaning franchise. Does that make sense? And what he wanted to do, since he had a cleaning franchise, his thought was, I could teach other people how to do a cleaning franchise. So the conversation is going to be around his UBS and me seeing him create his UBS. And I'm going to tear his UBS up. And have this conversation about it. So, look at UBS, and he's showing me, and I'm going to rip it. I said, this is it, is it? This is the thing, is it? Yeah, that's it. No, it isn't. I'm going to have that conversation. This isn't the thing you're going to do. Right? And I'm going to have this conversation with him to remind him back about this property thing. Does that make sense? Here. And have that conversation where he sees that. Right? And creates a different... Now, what am I doing here? By talking about something called the UBS, what am I doing? I'm also teaching and selling. I'm pre-framing what you're about to learn, isn't it? Yes or no, guys? So again, there's a feeling of, wow, what is that he taught the guy? I'm also positioning that I challenge you and help you overcome. So I'm going to do that thing. I'm going to basically tear out his UBS and have him build a different one around property. And then we're going to have a conversation. There's going to be, that's great. And then what's going to happen is he's going to have that epiphany moment that property is his thing. And I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to position another objection handler. Because the other objection people have is, I don't know what my thing is going to be. Does that make sense? Right? Because a lot of people, I want to be a speaker, but I don't know what I'm going to talk about. And they're confused about that. But actually, if you come to Speak Adversity, you hang around after the coach is long enough, that gets figured out. Does that make sense? So I'm going to position that as well. By solving that problem for him and telling him what he needs to do, then I'm positioning clarity as well. Brilliant. And it then becomes his decision to build content around property. Okay, good. So that's it. That's the big epiphany decision. Because before that, quite frankly, he was, if I didn't, at that moment, that very moment in time when he was building that shitty little fucking UBS around a cleaning round, he would not have made we'd be making 2.5 million a year selling that shit. All right? So that's good. So that's the clarity of decision. Now, Act 3. Are you with me so far, yes or no, guys? Yes. So obviously here, clearly I've got to have that scene there, which did I just do that scene? Did I do that scene yet? I didn't act it yet. Okay, but anyway, that's what I'm going to do there. And then there's a second scene here about my course. So this is the scene where I met him for the first time. Bit of conversation with me there. And obviously I'm positioned he didn't do it. Objection of why I didn't do it. Then I meet him 5 years later. Now what's been positioned there? Look at that. What's been positioned there subtly, please? 5 years of wasted time. Brilliant. That overcomes an objection called, I'll do it tomorrow. So there's a consequence of inaction. Good. All right. Then there's this scene of, again, it's all part of the same act because it's still part of the same journey, it hasn't moved on yet, it's not transformation yet. This is all essentially his reaction to losing his recruitment business, which becomes the holding pattern, and dabbling, shall we say, in it. And then him doing this property business properly. Okay. And then that's the decision. So then he gets the idea from me, must be property, makes the decision, great, so we know where we're going. Now, Act 3 starts with resistance. So resistance or ridicule is something essentially that you know what you're going to do, but the world doesn't support it. Or you're kind of skirting around the edges. You know what to do, but you've not really committed properly. You know, something's happened that's not quite perfect yet. So what happened to Paul? Now, the good news about this is you haven't got to manufacture any of this stuff because it's just how life is anyway. If you actually look at your client's story, it will actually match this scenario because that's how human beings operate. When there's a problem, and then you think you've got no other way, you then make it so you do it, and then your implementation of it is normally crap. In the beginning, yes or no, guys? It's a half-hearted implementation, right? It's like, there is some resistance. A lot of people fail at the resistance level, don't they? Yes or no, guys? Right? Or at least they stagnate at the implementation level. So again, I have to pace that reality as well. So you'll see how this all works. It's because it also shows how my solution solves it. So resistance was here that Paul did immediately start doing this property thing instead. But guess what he did? He went and worked for another company and started teaching their property stuff instead. So he was still what? The mouthpiece. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. He still hadn't done it for himself. And so that's going to be the resistance, okay? That's going to be what he hasn't quite yet evolved yet. And we're going to break through that resistance at Elite. So now I get the chance to build a scene called Elite, which is something I'm not even selling to these people yet, but it's like, oh my God, what's that thing? Right? Because the truth is, this resistance that you felt here was only really broken at the Elite level when he and I sat down for dinner. And I finally fucking got him. Because, and I'm going to reference this as well as a flashback, in between this time here and this time here, he actually won at that point Male Speaker of the Year. And I can remember in the drinks before the actual sit down began, he didn't know he obviously didn't know he was winning the award. I was just having a chat to him. I said to him, right, so are you ready now? Like, you've done really well now working for Rob. I said, are you ready now? Are you ready to start your business now? And he's like, no, I just don't really, I don't think I want to be involved in all the business side of stuff. I don't want the responsibility of all the business side of stuff. What's that a throwback to? Right the way back to this first act. Yes or no, guys? Right the way back to here. Which means that he wasn't over that. Right? So I'm going to reference that in like a bit of narration without actually doing a scene for it, because again, I don't have too many scenes, it gets messy, right? So I'm going to talk about I'm going to almost narrate that little bit there as almost like a segue. And then I'm going to build this scene here instead, because it's a better scene. And the best way to do that is actually just put that thing about the drinks bit at the awards dinner. I put that into the conversation I have with him here. Does that make sense? As in, remind him of that piece. Then I don't need another scene. I don't even need to narrate it. Raise your hand if you're with me, yes? So again, that's another technique we often do, is put it as a memory in a conversation. Reminding. So this took place in Thailand. In Phuket. Was it Koh Samui? Yeah. We did it twice. I can't remember which one it was, so there we are. We did it 1 year after the other. So you were there, actually. Did you understand that right? Yeah. Okay, so it's one where Jessamine was at as well. And specifically, it was in a restaurant. Now, I don't know the name of that restaurant. So I could either find out the name, unlikely, Paul might remember, or I can either state the name of the restaurant or just say a restaurant. I can't be specific, but I can remember what it looked like. In fact, there's a photograph somewhere that Paul's got, somewhere, of us sitting around that table somewhere. So I can remember, the only thing I remember from that picture is a checked tablecloth. So I'm just going to do that. In my head, I've made that little check, because that is just a thing that reminds me that that was there. And it was a long table. Probably you could have sat 30 people at it, but whilst what happened was there were all the other elite people there, then what had happened is most of them had gone home at this point, just leaving me, Becky, Paul, and Paul's partner, because she was there as well. And then this conversation's going to come up. Okay? I'm going to flash back to it, and then what's going to come out here has got to be his fear about the past. Does that make sense? And I'm also, at this point also, we're going to build in this thing about overcoming his lisp as well. That's going to be there as well. And that's the moment he's going to commit. So this is the resistance part. Happy with that so far, yes or no, guys? So this is going to be the break. This is going to be the resistance, and then we're going to see the breakthrough. Breakthrough needs to be 1, 2, 3. So that needs to be 3. 3 tangible, evidence-based results that get bigger each time. Small win, medium win, biggest win, or I guess most current win probably is best. So, okay, most current win. Well, I know he just messaged me literally last weekend here as a text. I can utilize that. And I could even, if I were doing the story right now, I could even make that part of the story to add more evidence to it. I could actually go to my phone and read out that as the third thing, couldn't I? Yes or no, guys? So we talk too much. Okay, there we are. You know, the problem is sometimes is that you have this problem, don't you? You're like trying to find a conversation with someone's like, was it WhatsApp? Was it text? Was it Facebook Messenger? Oh my God. Right, anyway, so I found it now, it's text. All right, so he said, hi mate, looking like I'll do close to £350,000 plus VAT equals £420,000 this weekend. There's a magic about this event. Feel free to share at Public Speakers University. Thank you for your continued help, support, encouragement and belief. Okay, so in my head, I've got here text 420k. Okay, perfect. And then, okay, so I've got the biggest result at the end. Now, what was one of the first results is probably the next best thing, isn't it? Okay, so the first big result was he did his first event and he made 80,000 on his first event. So that's a good one. And what's a good middle one that might not relate to money because something else maybe? Was
it something to do with his weight maybe? Or?
Yeah. So I can put that in there. So yeah, weight.
Where does the list come in?
Plus,
Where does the list?
Okay, that's going to be solved here.
Okay.
Yeah, the list things here. That's going to be part of what I say back to him.
What about the success of others?
Yeah, that's good actually. Yeah. Oh, okay, I know. Because then he created his own elite event in Thailand. Suggesting model excellence, yes? Right? Perfect. Okay, I'm happy with that. And then, so that's, if you will, and in this conversation here, he can sell me. He can talk back to me and say something about my training. Does that make sense? You know, you could say like, and I can ask him questions. Say, look, Andy, I can't believe you. I've been to your speakers university. You know, the speaker university was great. The academy is amazing. This elite training, these 7 days have been the best training I've ever done. And I can say to him back, but you know what? You've been dedicated, Paul, because everybody else, you know, and I've noticed, but you've been dedicated. In the evenings, you've been shut away in that room doing your homework, doing the training. And I can build that I can then say as a reason why he's unique and special and why that he'll succeed. Because it is one of the reasons why he succeeded, because he's a really good implementer. And he can bring that up right there. He can bring that up here. He can bring up this issue here. And I can say something at that moment that's really powerful, because what I said to him is, why would you want to sound like everybody else anyway? And then I can make that generically another thing for you guys to overcome as an issue, is that, well, you know, I don't like the sound of my voice, or, you know, my English isn't very good. I can use that as another generic objection handler at that point. Okay? Now, this didn't happen here, but I can say that it did, because it's still general. I can just mess around with time. At another situation at a later time, he also said to me, what's the biggest way I can give back to you? You've done all this for me, what can I give back to you? And I said, the greatest way you can honour me is to outgrow me. I can build that in as well. Does that make sense? That's another bit I can build in there. I could even say, and later, another time. I could just add that piece in. Good. So that gives me a really good Act 3. And then obviously, I've now positioned him, and I can now just a whole bit. And now today, Paul Preston has one of the best property trading right here in the UK. In fact, I just recommended him to speak in Dubai, a conference of 4,000 plus people, alongside Lisa Nichols from The Secret. Because again, one of the things I love doing is helping people like you to get on big stages, because it's a great opportunity for you, but it also reflects well on me, on my training. He has, of course, spoken many times at my own events as well. Maybe you will also too in the future. And I'm really proud of his achievements. Got it? That's a really good case study story. Now all I need to add is a theme for the beginning, and that I'll go back to at the end. Does that make sense? Because that's how I do themes. I don't start with the theme. I let the story tell me what the theme is. It's a much better way of doing it. So what would be a good theme? Well, the good message at the end is the biggest thing I want to overcome, the biggest question that I want them to overcome or to see, is that they are essentially just sitting on a gold mine. Because most people are sitting on, they're not truly tapping into all of their gifts, talents, ability. Does that make sense? Yes or no, guys? Yes. And it's a great thing for them to believe that they are valuable. So I want to make this something about them recognizing and living their destiny and their mission. Their value, their true value. So I could pose the question at the beginning, something like, have you ever considered what your destiny really is? Why are you here? And where are you going? And for what reason? And then I go into Act 1. Does that make sense? And at the end, I can come back. And I ask the question again. So, why are you here? What is your mission? Your mission, your vision is to serve. It is to give. The secret of living is giving. So what do you have inside of you right now that can really give to others? What problem in the world do you want to solve for other people? And surely it makes more sense for you to solve that problem for as many people as you can. So rather than working one-to-one, rather than working for somebody else making them rich, why don't you create your own organization, serve the people you love and that you care about on a one-to-many basis, get your message out, build your brand, and make the kind of income that, frankly, you deserve to make, given the skills, the knowledge, the know-how, the experience that you've built up through time. All that needs to happen now is for you to learn how to extract that genius that's inside of you, turn it into something of value for others, so that it is packaged in some way, and then learn how to present it in such a way that it draws those people to you, so you can serve the masses and become that motivational messenger, that millionaire messenger, so that you can live your destiny by helping other people. That is what we're going to do right now for the rest of this talk. So if you're ready for that, let's get started. And off we go, yes? Raise your hand if you understand, yes? Perfect. Okay. So let's do a quick recap because lunch is looming. And when you come back from lunch, you're going to go straight into an exercise where you create a client story. And then you'll be delivering this, obviously, today as well. Okay? So let's do a quick recap. Firstly, all the way back. So firstly, you're playing the role of sage here. You do not actually appear until Act 2. You will not appear in Act 1. You've got to describe Act 1 in such a way that the person ultimately, your client, experience a loss from some problem or conflict they go through. You have to do that story as if you're a fly in the wall, as if you're actually watching it and listening to it happen right now, as if it was happening right there, right now in the room. Once you understand what that scene is going to be, it needs to have a conflict in it that leads to a loss, which means the adversary has to be in it. As with all scenes, you now need to visualize that scene. The most important thing before you write anything down is to create a picture of the scene in your mind. Now, I know you weren't there necessarily, and I know in this instance you're not going to go and talk to your client to find out what the scene was like. So what I suggest you do, since you weren't actually there, is describe a scene, a room, a place where this might have taken place that you are familiar with. Does that make sense? Yes. And describe that scene as if it was the real scene. Got it? Because otherwise you manufacture something in your head, it's harder to recall a visual constructed image than it is to recall a visual remembered image. So my Act 1, I know because Paul Preston's taught this story before, so I know what that scene was. If I'm actually going to do a case study story, I would ask Paul what happened or describe that scene for me, and you can do that after today to find out the reality for that client if you wish. But for this purposes, manufacture a place that's familiar to you somewhat so you can put the audience in the scene. Remember, your choices are save the scene, so that's things that you can smell, auditory, visual, and emotions. So I chose just some anchored things. Chrome name on the wall. What does that even say? Oh, boardroom table, plush office, eerie silence, tent in the room. Great. Those are little anchor things for me. So I can write those things down, but I'm not going to write them as a whole essay. They're just little bullet points in my head to remind me. But all I'm going to do is once I've written it out, I'm going to sit in space and visualize the whole thing. So I'm visualizing, I can see Paul Preston sitting there. I can see David Green sitting there. I can see Paul, if he was to look across David Green, seeing the Chrome logo there. I can see the table. Does that make sense? I can feel the eerie silence and the tension in the room. And I can see David Green and what he looks like as a character. Does that make sense? That's it. And I don't need to think about anything else because that's now locked into my head. It's done. It's an image. Images are easy. A picture paints. Well, there's your words. So you don't need to write them because a picture will create them for you. Then I need the actual conversation between those characters. So now I've described the characters, what's the speech that happens, and the speech must tell the story. The speech always tells the story, okay? It's a snippet in time that represents what was happening at that time. There are many other things we could have chosen at that time and space to tell the audience he was about to lose his company. But the most dramatic one was this one. Does that make sense? So that's the one we choose, because it's the most dramatic version of how somebody, you, eavesdropping on the conversation, would suddenly discover he's about to lose his company. The chat between him and his wife, at some other point previously, or rather not his wife, but the chat between him and his girlfriend at the time, for example, would have been another way, but it's a boring way. Does that make sense? Perhaps, by comparison. Okay, so that's now our conflict and leads to our loss. Act 2 must be holding pattern. So what's the holding pattern that happened? And any in-between time between Act 1 and 2 can be caught up with narration. Narration. In the segue. Okay? And then, just before you go into Act 2, the words you'll say are... Thank you. I first met X, because that's the moment you suddenly appear in the story. Does that make sense? Raise your hand if you're with me. I first met Paul Preston when, okay? Or whoever yours is. Give it a timestamp at the time. And then there's another conversation here, okay? In my case, not necessarily in your case, there's also a second scene. But what happens in here must be, this pattern must be broken. The point about the catalyst is that it's you. The catalyst is you. Do you understand? Yes or no, guys? Yeah. You are the catalyst in the story. You are the inspiring person in the story. So your event, or whatever it is that you do, your thing that you do is the catalyst. This is the thing that breaks it. So in my case, the catalyst is Public Speakers University, because that's what breaks that pattern. Does that make sense? Yeah. Raise your hand if you understand. Yeah. Specifically, not only do I break that pattern, right, which is his holding pattern around, if you remember, speaking for somebody else in property, right? This one was the pattern of him still being a £6 at the time. Make sense? So I almost break two patterns, but not quite, because the last pattern isn't broken until the third. Remember? When he stops speaking for Rob Moore and starts doing it for himself. Okay? So, anyways, this gives me a chance to position my solution, doesn't it? So what I'm saying is, this here must represent, if you're training courses, if you're doing training courses, really, that's what that scene should be, shouldn't it? Yes or no, guys? Yep. That person's transformation at your program. But also, it has to be a conversation. So don't narrate that. It needs to be a conversation between you and them, where you break a pattern again. In my case, it was breaking a pattern of him making a UBS around, cleaning, when clearly this thing that he was doing that had most success was property. So I got him to change that. Good, so then that leads to the decision. Great. Act 3 needs to have resistance down here. So in this case, the resistance I choose is the one of him still working for somebody else, which leads right back to Act 1, which is the one of him not overcoming that wound. But I help him overcome that wound in this conversation I had with him around the dinner table, where I really slam it to him and say, right, are you going to fucking do this now? Are you going to keep on working for Rob? Because you've already proven you can convert now using these systems. You've proven that. You've just spent that money, you've just spent the money to be on Elite to make Rob more rich, is that correct? Or are you going to do this for yourself now? And then it's going to come up, there's going to be something, oh no, but I'm not, of course you're ready. right? And then he's going to come up with this thing, well, I'm not even happy about the way I speak, and then that's going to be the thing. Why would you want to sound like everybody else anyway? And that's like, for him, that was the penny that dropped. And then we just fast forward. We fast forward, and as a result of making that decision that day to start building his own company, he was able, with his first event, to make this. Then about a year later, he did this. And literally just last week, this result. And then I do my back to theme here, which I did a minute ago. Okay? Perfect. Any questions? Microphone needs for the benefit of the camera, please, Barbara. 1 second.
Thank you. It was just a quick question about using real names and real businesses.
Yep.
For me, for instance, I don't think the case study I'm thinking of, lovely as he is, he wouldn't be happy for me to tell the world.
Well, firstly, I wouldn't mind read that first.
Yeah, true.
I would actually just ask the question.
Yeah.
Because in the end, it's free advertising.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what you've got to tell them.
Yeah.
You know, the reason Paul Preston is happy to tell his story, the reason Paul Preston's happy to come to PSU and teach people or talk to his story about, you know, tell his story about why the benefits he got from being in PSU and PSA, he gets to do a free advert. Yeah. And people have already signed up to his program that heard him for the first time through me. Does that make sense? Right. So position it differently, Barbara, and you might find that this person would agree to it. Okay? If not, that's your decision about how you change the names. Yeah. But good question. Good. Anybody else? Yes, yes. Just here, please, first. Don't mind. Thank you, Stan.
Thank you. The amount of time per scene, how many minutes would you take for Act 1, 2, and 3?
So, if you're going to really be good at this, then I think a story needs to go for 12 to 15 minutes. If you're doing it right, like I am. If you're going to have the real proper version, it's actually about 4 minutes per scene. Maybe longer. So 12 to 15 is like your proper long version, which is still doable in a 90 to 2 hour presentation in terms of time. Obviously, if it's a very short presentation of 30 minutes, probably wouldn't take that long to do that piece, maybe, to cut it down a bit. But this is where I want you to aim now, because you're all experienced enough now. At the Speaker Diversity, we go 7 minutes, because if I said do a 15-minute story, it's too daunting. And most people would finish early because you wouldn't have enough content. But now you should. You should have enough. The only question you're going to have right now is, what if you don't have a client? So some of you might not have that. So can you raise your hand if you don't have a client? So do this as the case study story? Okay. You're going to tell your story as if you were the sage. So you're now going to do your personal story, but you're going to talk about yourself in the third person. Do you understand? Yeah. And you're going to make up some imaginary sage that helped you to get there. Does that make sense? So this is going to be a made-up story. Half a made-up story, essentially. Or you have to find some other way. But if you don't have a client, then you have to ultimately tell your story as the client and manufacture a Mr. Miyagi. Yes? 1 second, please, for the benefits of the camera. 1 second. Microphone.
I have a client, but the difficulty is the amount of transformation that client has had is not going to be at the level that is at.
Well, that doesn't matter. Remember that you're just comparing. Has the person received some transformation? Good enough. Now, if they've transformed and their transformation is a similar transformation to what you're promising you'll give other people, is it? Then this is irrelevant. This is just an example. Just because I've shown you an example of someone making this money doesn't mean to say you've got to find a story of someone who makes the same money. What is the area? Can I have the microphone back, please? What is the area of Sorry, back here, Lisa. Thank you. Yes.
Developing young leaders.
Developing young leaders.
Yep.
Right. So money's not important,
No.
obviously. So it's just the journey. I'm assuming it's a journey of someone who
started off as a work placement coordinator and is now kind of second in control at the college that I used to work for.
That's it. That's a good transformation, isn't it? Yes or no, guys? Yes. It's good enough. Yeah?
Thank you.
Yeah. It's a big problem people have is like comparing, my story's not good enough, whatever. No, it doesn't matter. Compared to your audience, is it the transformation they want? As long as it's in the direction you're meant to be going in, it's fine. And the beauty of this is, if I were doing a case study story 3 years ago about Paul Preston, then probably that is that one. I'd have to find 2 of them that are smaller than that. Does that make sense? Yeah. Raising me understand. So here's the beauty of this. Over time, as that client's positioning and development and results improve, you get to claim all of those. Right? Now, the truth is, maybe a zillion other things contributed to that. But it won't matter in your story. It will feel like it's associated to you. Does that make sense? Because the truth is, the fact he's done 420 might be, there's probably some other reasons that have got nothing to do with Andy Harrington why he did those things. Make sense? But it looks like it's all me. All right? And people will see it that way as well. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yes, I'm coming here, and then I'm going there. Please.
Can the story be a combination of different clients' stories?
No. No, because that would just get really diluted. What's the reason why you would want it to be so?
Because I don't have this client that have walked through the whole journey, but there are different clients had bits and pieces. So for me to create a perfect client, to use it as a case study probably make better sense.
Well, hang on. Let's just pick about one of them. What are you saying? So you're basically helping people and they don't finish?
Because I just started my business, I helped advise people for free. So for me to create a study, I need to create a perfect client from the bits and pieces.
So first, you don't get a perfect client. It's a client that has transformed. So do you have a client you've helped, even for free?
Yeah.
Right? They're still client, it's just not paying client. Mm-hmm. Have you helped one person to overcome a problem?
Yeah, but it's not the whole thing.
What's the whole thing? I don't understand what this means. So did they transform, yes or no?
Yes, they did.
What did they transcend from? So what was the problem that they then transcended?
So one is he can't nail interviews.
He couldn't nail interviews. Yeah. Is he now nailing? Does he have a job?
Yeah, he's in his dream job.
So what the fuck is the problem here? And sorry, hang on a second. Wait. What's the solution you provide, please?
So it's to help professionals to land their dream job, get paid their worth.
Okay. So what is the issue here?
It's a total solution. Some people have no clue what exactly they want.
Yes. So you're clear. Hang on a second. So in Paul Preston's story, right? Nothing. This gives a result that he's got, but it does I'm not trying to position everything that I do here, right? This isn't like storytelling. Don't talk about storytelling in there. This is actually just about making money, isn't it? Yes or no, guys? Yes. But the truth is, I also teach people to just not necessarily make money, but become better storytellers, make their own information products. So what you're saying is, I've got loads of other modules, but one story doesn't represent all the modules. Is that correct? Yes. Doesn't matter. All right? All it says is your system or subsystem of helps people evolve. That's it. All you're trying to prove is that the stuff you teach works through a client. All right? Now, the beauty is, later on, those extra stories you said can I have more? Yes. And then you might tell those stories later on when you teach those modules. Make sense?
Yep.
We just got to choose one in the beginning to overall give them an indication that you can help people in your chosen area. Make sense? So one at a time. Yes. Okay. Good. It's really interesting, isn't it? And I find it really fascinating that And the comparison thing is a problem for many of us because we still think, well, it's not quite good enough, and all that belief just stops you. Like if I compared myself to Tony Robbins when I first started, it would have been, like just crushing to compare that, right? Because, he's just so much more advanced than I was, right? He's still trying to catch up now, but that's all right. Across, Steve, please. Can you pass it? Huh? Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Own it, baby.
Yeah, so Andy, I have a question, actually. It's two questions in one. So how far should you go back with your story? Like, for example, like in terms of time frame, like how far back? And secondly, one reason I'm actually asking that, so I used to be an employee where I actually work for people and I help their business to sort of grow in profit, etc. And now I cannot do that as a sort of a freelance contractor, or consultant. I have my own firm. So the question is, I have stories that I can use when I was an employee, and I have stories that I can use doing it in my own business.
So when you were an employee, what you're saying is your client at that time was another employee?
No, my client was a business. I worked in the business as an employee, as an accountant, for example.
But you went out externally and helped other businesses?
No, I helped them, that business,
I
to
understand.
actually grow. But obviously that was
So the question is, at the end of the story,
Yeah.
what does it position you as, and does it also position your solution?
It does, but the question is, should I go back far or should I use something that's more recent?
The time doesn't matter.
Okay.
What matters is in the story something that this person, the client, implemented that is something that you're selling?
Yes.
Because back years before, that wasn't what you were selling at the time. It's more an employee relationship. Does that make sense? Unless you can make it so. As in, you can still talk about your system that you created back then, that can still work, but ideally it would be a client story of someone you're working with now. But in absence of that not being a very good story, or there isn't anything there, then go back and do this.
Yeah, makes sense, yeah.
But then as time evolves and you guys get better clients, we then change our story using the same system to find that client because that's a better example. Yes or no, guys?
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you.
Pass down the line. Come back to you a sec.
So I've got my first preview event next week.
Yep.
And
congratulations, by the way.
So in the client story, so I haven't actually run the event yet, but I've got a success story from a one-to-one coach. I'm moving from one-to-one to one-to-many.
Yes.
So is it okay if I use my one-to-one success in the story?
Yes.
And
then, again, as time evolves, choose someone who's not necessarily a one-to-one client unless you are also selling one-to-one.
And also, I've written a client story for my event next week.
Yeah.
But the way I've written it is I do the client story and then I do what I learned from the client story and how I develop my model as a result of working with that client. So
yes.
It's a bit longer.
No, it isn't actually. Okay. Let me explain. So what you're saying is that somewhere in here, right, where does the explanation of your UBS development and stuff come in? In Act 1, 2, 3, where is it?
The Act 2, I start working with the client. It's about happiness is an inside job.
Yeah.
And the client is broken inside, and I work with the client, and if I help them find their happiness,
Fine.
and then I realised that my model that I was working with, which was industry best practice, was omitting the inside job.
Perfect. So all you're doing then in Act 2 of your story, where the person is the journey, this is your journey and their journey entangling. Does that make sense? And what you're saying is, okay, your idea is developed as a result of this client, which is fantastic because they stretched you. Amazing.
Yeah.
And then you can talk about, it's almost like the development or the birth of your solution.
Yes.
Perfect. Not a problem. Great. Needs to be in there. It still should ideally fit within 15 minutes. Okay. So maybe your story, there's some other areas where it can be edited a bit. Because how long do you think it goes for at the moment?
My rehearsal was 28 minutes.
Yeah, it's too long, definitely. But either you can speak faster. So either you can just speed it up a bit,
David, yeah.
or condensing scenes is another option, using some memory back rather than an actual scene. Or there's just some dead areas of narration that maybe can come out. But again, coaching and mentoring can probably assist with that process. Or what you could do is you could leave out the bit relating to the birth of the UBS, maybe, and then as the story finishes and you then go into your UBS, make sense?
Yes.
You can have a bit of conversation about the development of the UBS based on that client after you finish the story.
Sounds good.
So you'd say something like, okay, so as a result of what I learned from John, what I discovered is that there were some pieces missing. And I don't want you to miss those pieces. So as a result, what I discovered was that these things are important. That was important, this was important, which is why I put all that together today when I help my clients. I developed a system that's robust now that includes all the things I've learned from clients like John over the years, so I can improve my solution such that the implementation of this just works. So let's talk about that UBS now. Well, you wouldn't say UBS, but that's what let's talk about the blah, blah, blah model, and clack, you go. So then you've just sort of taken that bit out of the story, because it might be a detour in the story as you start talking about it. Does that make sense? It becomes a bit teachy almost at that point, maybe. Yeah. So if you took that bit out and reflect upon it outside the story as you're segueing into your slides, that might work even better. So have a look at that. Okay? Good. Yes, I think Jason was next, so we can go there. These are all good questions, by the way, that are eating into your lunch. Fantastic.
So just quickly, in my industry, I've got a confidentiality with clients.
Yes.
So what I tend to do is either change a name or blend 2 or 3 cases together that are very similar.
Yeah.
So
look, in the end, this is up to you, right? As in how far off the truth you go away from. So, under those conditions, I think that's totally fine because of confidentiality to blend or change names. I think that's totally fine. Yeah. So again, think about that, guys. Look at a story you've done. Could you, if it's not the best story ever, do you want to blend 2 or 3 people in to kind of suggest that's person results and change the name? In which case, someone can't say, well, that wasn't my story because it's a name of a person that is some kind of mixture of 3 people, for example. Again, that is up to you, how you do it, from an ethics point of view, etc. That's your own decision. You have the mic.
So if if your client, you've never actually met them in person, like you dealt with them online or through Zoom or something like that, would you set the scene of you sitting down at your laptop?
Well, you've got to describe the scene as you are seeing it.
Yeah.
The scene, the only reason we have a scene is so they have a picture.
Okay.
That's the only reason, right? Because otherwise it's empty. So they need to see what you are seeing, okay? That's Act 2 though, right?
Yeah, that would have to be Act 2, yeah. That's
right.
Correct, yeah.
Which is fine. So you're what, I'm sitting in, describe your house. I'm looking at my, Mac, describe the Mac. Whatever, use that description. Doesn't matter. It's just about, it doesn't have to be a dramatic scene setting.
Okay.
Just the scene. Act 1, obviously, is the description of their problem scene, yes? Which either you need to find out what that was or manufacture it now in your mind and change it later to be closer to the truth. That's your decision, okay? Good. Any others? Yes, Sally Ann, at the front here, please.
Thank you. I just want to ask about the segue between when you met the person and then to the transformation.
Yeah.
I met my client in 1965 at school.
Yes.
And we stayed friends. And
this is theme Act 1, is it?
Yes.
Yes.
And she developed the problem that I can solve in 2017. So that's a jolly long segue.
Start in 2017.
Oh, okay, right. Okay. So not when I first met her.
No.
Okay, thanks.
No. Yeah. So you wouldn't have the I first met her because it won't be true. No. You'd say the next time I saw her was. Right, well, Act 1 is going to be the problem seen in 2017, isn't it? Yeah. You just need to say in 2017, when you talk about that scene, you may want to, and it's not necessary, but you may want to reference that you've been friends for years. Since 1965. That comes up, in the conversation it could come up, look, we've been friends since 1965. If you think that's relevant, just have it come out of one of your mouths in the conversation. Does that make sense? Raise your hand if you understand. Yeah. Now we don't need a scene to say that because it's unnecessary. Okay? Good. Cohen, please. Did I say that correctly? Is that close? How do you say?
Kun.
Kun.
It was close.
Kun. Thank you.
Sorry for everyone for holding up your lunch, by the way.
I'm sure it's fine.
No, I have one question. So the breakthrough of a personal story is obviously like, like in my case, like being a television host and doing like helping others.
Sure, yeah.
Blah blah. Here the breakthrough is like in the end trying to enroll them in your course. Do you name a company? Like for example, the first real time I worked with clients, in this case parents, was with the trajectory of the Vodafone campaign, which in the end was very successful. But would you call Vodafone in your story, or would you not call an external company in your story? Because it does like...
I went into a trance there, so...
Okay,
so back up. Before you repeat, what's the problem you want me to solve with this question?
Would you call, like in your story, would you name a company that's not your own to back up your
what's
experience?
The benefit? Why do you think it needs to be in the story?
Well, for me, like Vodafone, in my case, Vodafone is like a good reference.
Great, stop there. Fine. What's the problem with mentioning them? What's the concern or worry by mentioning them, please?
Maybe that also, that in your own, you might not be able to be good enough to help the parents, but with a company like that, you're able to reach the audience. Or
I get that, but why is it a problem then to say the word Vodafone? Why are we having this conversation? What's your concern?
Well, you have a point.
Huh?
You have a good point. So in the end, it's no problem.
I think, I'm just checking.
Like this is
what's
just
your concern if I mention another company? I'm promoting another company. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, potentially.
Or the company might have a problem with it. Is that what you're thinking?
Oh no, they don't have a problem with that.
I don't have a problem with it either then. Okay, so that's fine. Okay, good.
Thank
all right. Any more? Just one more then. Pass behind, please. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so you talk about the sage appearing in the second act.
Yes.
But I think I have to appear in the first act because somebody comes to me and asks me, my parents are going downhill fast, and the information that I give transforms their life. So.
Sorry, hang on a second.
Okay.
Say again.
So the information that she comes to me with.
Who's the she?
Anna. She's somebody I've just met after she'd seen me talk.
Yes.
And then I tell her she tells me what's happening to her parents. They're going downhill fast.
Yes.
Because he's a carer.
What does that mean?
Because he cares for his wife for over 20 years and she's going down.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
So, so, and then what I say to her, she explains it in great detail.
And she is your client, is that right?
No, she's not. He is, really. But I give this information for free.
Okay, so why is this Act 1, please?
Well, I never meet him. They live in another country.
Hang on a second. You want the story to be about his transformation?
Yes, but I've never met him, but she tells me all about it.
Okay, so Act 1, right?
Yeah.
Act 1 of your story needs to be why they're going downhill.
Not in the coffee shop when she comes.
No. Like, it's, in Act 1 in Paul Preston's,
yeah.
I never knew Paul Preston at this time.
No.
So I've got to have the problem that ultimately gets solved in the end needs to be one before I met them, doesn't it?
Mm.
So you said they're going downhill, yes?
Yes, so he's going downhill rapidly.
What their relationship was?
No, physically, emotionally, mentally, because he was caring for her for 20 years.
Great. So I need a scene that represents that, please.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay.
That's the problem that you end up solving. Do you want to be known for solving that problem?
I do, yeah.
Perfect.
What about Anna, so his daughter who came to me? Do I just take that out of it completely? What do you think? She was the one who came to me.
No, it's the truth. It needs to be there. Okay. But the first problem needs to be, but what we could do is, Anna has a problem too.
She does, because it helps her as well.
Well, she has a problem because it's her parents, right? Yeah. So we need to have a scenario where all three people are involved and she's there. And there's this big fucking scenario because he's going downhill. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? And then your Act 2 says something like, how long, let's say this problem happened 6 months ago, right? Yeah. From when you met Anna.
Yeah.
So we need to have, in essence, you only found out, okay, hang on a minute. When you sat down and spoke to Anna for the first time in a coaching situation, yes, because you helped her in order to help him, is that right?
That's it. I gave her the information.
Great. So when you had that thing, she would have told you what the problem was.
Yeah.
Correct? Yes or no, guys? Yes. That's always what happens. Yeah. The first time you meet your client, the client tells you what has happened. So what the client says has happened is your Act 1. Yeah. Do you understand? Yes or no, guys? Yeah. As in, when they told you what the problem was, she'd have said some scenarios, wouldn't he? This happens to my father. Yeah. Right? So we now have a scenario that represents the problem. You take the client into that problem, and then you go forward in time and say, the first time I met Anna, because Anna's in this scene, was when she came to me desperate to solve this challenge.
Okay. I got
Understand?
I do, yeah.
And then we go on from there. Does that make sense to you?
I do, yeah. Thank you.
Who's with me, yes? Say yes?
Yes.
Perfect. Well done. Okay, so it's 1:30. So it is definitely lunch. So what we'll do now is we'll just go to lunch. We'll come back and sit back in main scene afterwards. I'll just do a quick recap, a reminder, set up the exercise, break them into pods. We'll get into creation, and then we'll obviously set up how long that will be, and then the delivery piece that comes later. All right? Good. Enjoy it so far? Yes. Wonderful. Well done. See you back in 1 hour. Thank you so much. All right. So now obviously let's get into the implementation part. Let's do an exercise on this. So this is just the creation piece. My advice, as I said, is not to write it out like an essay in full. First thing you do is figure out first, who is this client? As in, what's going to best position my UBS and also therefore me? What's the problem I'm going to be introducing or pacing that's similar to the problems my clients might face? What objections do I want this thing to overcome? That helps you decide who the client is the story is going to be about, because hopefully you've got more than one to choose from. Then obviously you've got your Act 1, which is going to be some historical event that is an example of the problem. And you're going to go back as a fly on the wall and build a scene for that, where there's a conflict between whomever that ultimately escalates and becomes a big problem, a setback, a loss, or whatever of some kind. So then once you're building that scene, once you know what that scene is, then you've got to flesh it out, which means, okay, make a picture of it in your mind. Just simply make a picture in your mind of that scene. Be specific with the nouns, meaning places have names. Don't say hotel, say Felbridge Hotel near Gatwick. Make sense? So get some specificity in there as you describe the scene. Just what you see, give them something to watch and see based on what you can see as you look around in your imagination from that memory. Is there any sounds you want to mention? And obviously emotions. Is it a tense feeling, etc.? Clearly, this is a scene where you define whom's sitting there. So we need to know who's there. In this case, obviously, I'm depicting this scene as if we're looking as a fly on the wall, looking out at one side and the other side, David Green and, of course, Paul Preston. And then one of those people starts speaking to the other person, obviously. And this conversation, as it unfolds, means that the audience now figure out what is actually happening, as in what is this problem. And it should reflect a problem that the audience would kind of be familiar with, understand, empathise with, or be worried about themselves. This escalates to a loss. Okay? Done. So you build the conversation in the act by looking at that conversation. Again, what do people like? What do they look like? I've already said that already. Act 2, holding pattern down the bottom, which is the big problem, of course. This is where you've got loads of objection handlers to come in to help paste what might keep them stuck here, because what keeps your client stuck there might be the same things that keeps people stuck that are in your audience listening to this story. So we want them to go, wow, Paul Preston's a bit like me, in effect. Yes or no, guys? Yeah. As in, not feeling they're ready, hesitating, not feeling you're good enough, whatever. Great, people feel the same way. Great, so that's your holding pattern. Now, whether you need a second scene or not is dependent on you. I did have a second scene, but this might all happen in one scene. But ultimately, whatever happens, you've got to break that pattern. Does that make sense? You, as the catalyst, breaks this pattern. Okay? Now, when that happens, might be a second subsequent time, it was in my case, or a separate location. But whether you do it as one scene or two scene is a choice of yours. But when you break that pattern, ultimately, it should happen with your solution. So the pattern is broken by you whilst you deliver the solution you wish to sell. Does that make sense? Yes or no, guys? Whatever you're selling, in my case, Speakers University, was indeed ultimately the catalyst that got him to see he shouldn't be doing this other shit, but he should be doing this, and he can build a business around it in my case. Good. Act 3 is about the transformation, as in it's the implementation of this epiphany moment. Client's epiphany moment, not yours. You provided the epiphany by what you said or what you did, because you're the sage. Initially, some resistance to implementing it. In this case, his resistance was around he still did it, but he still did it whilst working for other property companies. So he wasn't really doing it by himself. He was still playing safe. Why? Because he was still afraid of failure based on the previous loss that we started with in the first place. So there's a link back to that in some way. Whether yours links back or not doesn't really matter. It just does work really well for me. It might do. So I've then got to ultimately, he by himself has to break that resistance, or in this case, I was able to help him break it because there's another scene where I say more things while he was at the elite training that made him break through, ignore his list, get over his fear of loss, and ultimately commit to doing it. And then we jump forward in time to his results. 1, 2, 3 results, small win, medium win, big win. And of course now we return back to the theme. So the theme eventually was also about your destiny and stuff like that. That's what I said. And obviously now what's your destiny, turning it back to you. Okay, so remember, in each of these acts we need at least one scene. Every act needs a scene, okay, where this stuff takes place. The segues can be catching up over time, the gaps in between the scenes. That can be a good segue. That's it. Once you've done this exercise to create, all right, I'm going to bring you back here to remind you of a few delivery techniques before you then go and deliver it, okay? So that'll give us a little buffer in between the two. Because I want to talk to you again about a few distinctions around dialogue, a few distinctions about where to act it out and things like that on the stage, how to do the segues. Obviously, this is just creation piece, okay? All right, so we're going to give you 90 minutes to create, so an hour and a half. It's quite a long time. So it's about 30 minutes at least per act, per scene, if you will. So should be more than enough time. I just want to remind you again, I do not encourage you to write it all out like a big long essay. If you need to and want to, that's fine. It's just not the way I do it. I bullet point it almost like this. Like I draw the journey and then I just visualize that. As part of this 90 minutes, I would really encourage you to be walking around acting it out. So the first time you stand up and present it to a live audience, you would have already done it to yourself a few times. Does that make sense? Yeah. As if you were doing it. So once you've got a general idea what the composition's going to be, then start acting it out, start doing it, start performing it, so that the neuro connections start to be built in your head around it. Then when we add an audience, it's not the first time you've had to do it. Otherwise, you're going to be just in your head thinking. Okay? So part of this 90 minutes must also include practice to self, if you make sense. Okay? And some of you might just want to do practice to self the whole time. You don't ever get a bit of paper out. If you're good at doing it that way, that's fine. I suggest first you storyboard it out like this, so you know what each act is, and maybe what the segues are. Once you've got a good idea what the conversation is going to be, what the scenes will look like, just perform it. Just do it. Either visually in your head by rehearsing mental rehearsal, and or externalized by saying it out loud, just walking around as if you did have an audience. Okay? That's the whole thing. So we're going to be dividing up, as always, into various speaking stations, speaking pods. And Martin is going to be describing where those are and how big the pods are, etc. for this piece. So I welcome to the stage Martin Sharp. Give him a hand. Thank you much. Good.
Okay, so we've got 14 speaking pods here today. We're going to have 3 in this room. There's 2 at the front, 1 at the back. The person at the back will be filmed on the camera. We're going to have 6 in the ballroom 2 next to us. There's going to be 2 in the room that's further on, the entrance hall that came through. And at the back where we've got the teas and coffees, there's another 2, and then just 1 in the hallway here. So that's 14 pods in total.
Okay, can you do it one more time so everybody can visualise that again?
Yeah, certainly. So that's 3 in this room, 2 at the front.
1.
Yep.
1
at the back.
The back will be filmed, which means essentially, because we have people watching and they're still interested in doing this, now hopefully they're at home doing the actual work themselves, the exercise. But if you're one of those people who reads a book and then says, now do the exercise, and you don't, and you carry on reading, then you guys can listen in vicariously to the conversations that take place between coaches, if you wish to, online. So if you're happy to be listened to, then you'll be in that group, okay?
Okay, then we've got 6 in the room next to us, which is ballroom 2.
Yep.
So there's 2 there, 2 in the middle, 2 towards back.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 2 in the room that's just beyond ballroom 2, so that's the entrance hall you came through,
Yep.
where the registration desk was. Yeah. And then we've got 2 at the back where we've got teas and coffees, and then 1 in the hall that's just down here, just by the toilets.
Perfect.
Okay. No
Right.
inference.
Yeah. So it's 14 in total.
Yeah, so
and the coaches are going to go to those stations, are they? And just stand by?
Yeah, so coaches will be there at the stations. There'll be maximum of 7 people per pod.
Good.
So that's 14 pods, 7 people per pod.
Okay. Are some groups lower than 7?
No. There should always 7.
Huh?
All 7s.
Oh, so it actually divides equally?
Yeah.
So unless somebody disappeared at lunchtime, which might have happened, it's even 7, okay? So if you've got 8 in a group, somebody has to go. If you've got less than 7, you need to recruit, okay?
And enjoy.
So 90 minutes, which means that this exercise completes at 4:15.